Chapter 2968. "'Tis the Crown Princess," the old woman hurriedly said. Then she glanced at Madame Gowan fawningly and said with a grin, "But don't worry, madam. This old servant has already sent that little Crown Princess away." "How did you send her away?" Madame Gowan sized her up suspiciously. The stoic-faced Crown Princess wasn't that easy to send away. Madame Gowan vigilantly had the man beside her use his spiritual perception to search the surroundings. After confirming that there were no strangers lurking nearby, she sighed in relief. "You did very well." Madame Gowan nodded. "Kai-hui, give her 5 spirit coins as a tip." "Yes." The old maidservant took the reward and left while thanking her profusely. She even thought to herself, "Fortunately, I saw that portrait in Madame's court before. That's how I recognized this stoic-faced young crown prince consort at a glance." Speaking of which, she had only caught a glimpse of her from afar. At that time, Madame was throwing iron darts in the small court, and there was a portrait hanging on the target. Later on, she secretly asked the old woman in the same area and learned who the portrait was. Fortunately, she had a good memory. If she continued to tangle with the little stoic crown princess, who knew what would happen in the future? Perhaps it would really arouse the suspicion of this stoic-faced crown princess, and she would come in to investigate regardless. If she ruined Madame's plans because of her, Madame definitely wouldn't easily forgive her. That old woman cracked a smile and continuously tossed a spirit coin in her hand as she left with a chuckle. However, she didn't know that not long after she left, a person appeared on the treetop. Arbor knitted his small brows tightly and raised his hand to scratch his small head. In truth, she originally didn't want to meddle in this matter, but she didn't expect Xuanxuan's crow's beak really hit the nail on the head. She had worn out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort. Judging from Madame Gowan's sneaky behavior, she definitely didn't do anything good. Perhaps the Qin family's 5th young master and Ming Bao were abducted by this Madame Gowan. No one knew when she came to the Wind Thunder City. Her whereabouts were quite strange. She actually managed to hide from the Crown Prince's spies outside the Wind Thunder City. Arbor didn't know that the Madam of the National Security Agency had deliberately disguised herself before setting off for the Wind Thunder City. She kept a very low profile along the way and didn't cause any commotion. The carriage she used was also very simple. She didn't even use the main entrance when she left the imperial capital. If it weren't for the old woman's guilty conscience and dodging after seeing the arbor, she wouldn't have aroused Miss Chiao's suspicion. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. Why did this Madam of the National Security Agency come to the Wind Thunder City instead of being a proper wife in the imperial capital? Did she catch 5th young Master Qin on the spur of the moment, or did she come here specially? This small courtyard was not very big, so Arbor only casually walked around the courtyard and found the 5th young master tied to the bed in a small room. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Mr. Jojo wouldn't have known that the Madam of the National Security Agency had such a weird hobby. She liked to tie men up on the bed. What kind of hobby was this? Arbor glanced through the window and saw that the 5th young master's expression seemed to be in extreme pain. It was obvious that he had been drugged. Miss Chiao blinked and associated it with the previous incident where she treated the 5th young master. Could it be that the filthy aphrodisiac powder was also administered by this talented Madam of the National Security Agency? Chapter 2969. Sir Jojo floated in through the window and silently arrived beside the large bed. Looking at Qin Xiu's pained appearance for a long while, he seemed to have thought of something and raised his head slightly. He felt a light bulb flash through his mind. No wonder Madame Guar of the Goan Madame called out young Sir Qin on the spot at the palace banquet last time when she gave her a beautiful dream. As it turned out, she was thinking of this 5th young Sir Qin back then? That wasn't right either. The little girl tilted her head and associated it with Madame Guar of the Goan Madame's disgraceful behavior back then. It seemed like she was doing something with several Qin young Sir Qin, not just fooling around with this 5th young Sir Qin in the fantasy realm. This Madame Guar of the Goan Madame wasn't afraid of dying from a loss of blood. When the little stoic thought of this, she couldn't resist pursing her lips in disdain. 5th young Sir Qin abruptly opened his eyes, which were brimming with bloodlust and hatred. When his gaze landed on the little stoic, he was instantly dumbfounded. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he opened his eyes with all his might. When he discovered that expressionless stoic face was still standing at the head of her bed and looking at him, he couldn't resist saying hoarsely, "Save me, save me." 1,000,000 spirit coins and a stalk of tearless grass. The little stoic didn't have any extra expression on her face, and her tone was indifferent, as if she was making a deal with him. Fifth young Sir Chin was slightly taken aback, and then he nodded with all his might with reddened eyes. Arbor replied with an "oh" before reaching out to pull him up from the bed. The dagger in her palm directly chopped off several ropes binding him. Her movements were extremely rough, without the slightest regard for whether a person without any cultivation could withstand her strength. Qin Xiu couldn't describe his feelings. He actually knew from the start that this stoic face was a heartless and cold-blooded person. Back then, the reason why she saved him was because Physician Chang repeatedly begged her and even offered a large sum of money. Arbor lowered her head to glance at this fifth young sir before swaggering outside while carrying him. "You were poisoned with 8 types of X drugs last time. Was it the Ministry of the Goen's doing?" Fifth young Sir Chin's expression was rather indignant. He was a grown man, yet he was being held in her hands like a little chick. Not to mention that he couldn't get over his embarrassment, he couldn't bear it mentally either. Moreover, her extremely puzzled expression was a little glaring. He didn't believe that Ling Gu wouldn't have told her the truth when she saved him in Langfang previously. How could he have never mentioned the name of the Madam of the National Security Agency? It was obvious that she had forgotten. Or perhaps it should be said that she didn't take the matter of saving him, Fifth Qin, to heart at all. After she was done, she completely forgot about him. Seeing that he pursed his lips and didn't speak, Arbor didn't bother to ask anymore. Anyway, her relationship with the Qin family was just like that. The Qin family's fifth young master was a good-for-nothing. If he had the ability, he might be as bad as his second brother. Arbor felt annoyed as he carried him. When he exited the room, he coincidentally bumped into Madam of the National Security Agency. Madame Goen was so nervous that her whole body trembled. She subconsciously hid behind the strong man beside him. Subsequently, she felt that her cowardice was truly a bit outrageous. Why are you here?" Madame Goen's voice resounded in the small courtyard. "You're trespassing on private property." Arbor sneered at her. "If you're unconvinced, come fight me." Madame Goen instantly retreated several steps. Chapter 2970. Fuck. Madame Goen repeatedly cursed in her heart. However, when she recalled that damnable ugliness at the palace banquet last time, which caused her to not dare to leave the house for more than half a month, she inexplicably felt apprehensive when she saw Arbor now. This lass was truly sinister, so she really didn't dare to confront her directly again. "Arbor, I'm warning you." Madame Goen inwardly shuddered and couldn't resist scolding. "You immediately put him down. Let's go our separate ways. Hurry and leave. I'll treat it as if I never saw you." Before Madame Goen could finish her sentence, she was startled by Arbor, who suddenly flashed forward and hastily retreated several steps. "How can you be so shameless?" Arbor expressionlessly looked at her and said, "Fifth young Sir Chin doesn't seem to like you, so why do you keep pestering him?" Madame Goen was so angry that her face flushed red, and she couldn't resist roaring, "What the hell do you know? He's already mine now." Fifth young Sir is just shy by nature and isn't good at expressing himself. Arbor instantly loosened his grip, and Fifth young Sir felt like he was a pile of trash that the little girl threw away. When she peeked at him, it was as if she was looking at a pile of dirt, and she even hastily took out a small white handkerchief from her pocket to wipe her hands. Humiliation and anger instantly flashed past Fifth young Sir's eyes, and he exerted all his strength to move his limp limbs, but he felt powerless all over. Don't listen to her nonsense. Fifth young Sir couldn't help but panic when he saw the little girl's cold expression and how she was about to leave. He reached out to grab a ribbon on her skirt and struggled with all his might. She's talking nonsense. I don't know what the hell you two are doing." The little girl looked impatient and disinclined to care. You guys settle it yourselves. She still had to hurry and find her Lien, so how could she have the leisure to fool around with this bunch of idlers? Why you can't cough? I was caught by her. She caught me. Why you clearly know. Fifth young Master Qin was so infuriated that his entire body was trembling. He was infuriated at this young lady's aloofness and decisiveness, and he was also infuriated that he didn't have any cultivation and was just a piece of trash. He was like a fish on a chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. What? He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood, which formed a dark red puddle on the ground. The little stoic halted her steps and lowered her head to glance at him. When she saw that this person was truly so infuriated that his entire body was trembling, she couldn't help but pace back and forth in irritation. In the end, she still felt apologetic, so she bounced back and picked up the fifth young master again. The little stoic expressionlessly shouted at Madame Gua, "Scram!" Madame Goen was furious and couldn't help but curse. "Stoic face, do you really think I'm afraid of you?" As soon as Madame Goen gave the order, 4 or 5 people who looked like secret guards immediately flew behind her. Arbor glanced at her and snorted. "You think you can stop me with just a few small fries? Aren't you too naive? What big words?" Madame Goen sneered coldly, "Take him down. Be careful of her poison." Arbor tossed fifth young Sir Qin to the side again and summoned that black feral from his conscious. Several small blue flames whizzed in the direction of the secret guards. Chapter 2971. A little spiritual master dares to be so arrogant in front of us. Before she could finish her sentence, one of the blue spiritual cleansing flames burned in front of Madame Goen. Madame Goen was enraged, and she waved her sleeve, wanting to brush away that leaping blue spiritual cleansing flame. However, that flame suddenly emitted sparks in front of her, and the intensity of the fire instantly soared. Caught off guard, Madame Goen jumped in fright. Fortunately, that robust man beside her was sharp-sighted and nimble, pulling her into his embrace and using his muscular arm to block that blue spiritual cleansing flame. Arbor focused her gaze and saw that black spirit armor had formed on that man's arm. The blue spiritual cleansing flame couldn't burn through this man's spirit armor and only wrapped around the outer layer for a few seconds before quietly vanishing. Madame Goen was unable to restrain her anger. She was a level 12 great spiritual master, but she was always so defeated in front of this little girl. This little girl clearly looked like a low-level little spiritual master, so why did she feel like her attacks were so swift and fierce? She couldn't help but feel a bit vindictive. Her desire to kill this little girl grew stronger and stronger. She was calculating. If she could kill this brat here without anyone noticing, she would be able to do so. It shouldn't be to the extent of being immediately discovered by the crown prince, right? As long as she acted quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately, she could send people to clean up the traces here afterwards. Madame Goen's gaze was ruthless and gloomy as she stared at Arbor and said word by word, "Immediately scram from this courtyard and treat it as if nothing happened, and I can still let you off." Fifth young Master Qin, who had been thrown to the ground by the little girl, couldn't stop trembling. He had already prepared for the worst, which was that the little girl would throw him away without a second word. In that case, he would have no way to survive. Rather than being humiliated by this hateful old woman, he might as well show his sincerity by dying. Miss Chiao responded to Madame Goen's words by slapping her across the air. This was simply fucking awesome. Fifth young Master Qin, who had fallen to the ground, looked at Miss Chiao in a daze. Then, he barely supported his limp body and crawled back a few steps. What a joke! When has my Arbor ever retreated without a fight? Sir Jojo's heart also burned with true fury. She couldn't be more clear about Madame Goen's gaze. This woman actually had killing intent towards her. Since that was the case, why should she be polite and talk nonsense with her? Just kill them. At this time, the anger and resentment in Goen's heart had reached its peak. That slap just now had really made her lose all her face. With the new and old hatred added together, the anger in Goen's heart burned fiercely. If he didn't do it, he would go all the way. He hardened his heart and shouted angrily, "What are you all standing there for? Get rid of this bitch right now." Everyone looked at each other and hesitated for a moment. They were well aware of the true identity of the little girl in front of them. Get rid of the crown princess? It felt good to make a move now, but what about after that? After the crown princess was taken care of, would things really end like this? After the crown prince lost his beloved wife, what terrible things would he do? When the time came, who would bear the consequences? One of the secret guards took a deep breath, cupped his hands and said to Madam, please reconsider. Now that His Highness the Crown Prince had the purple forest guard in his hands on the surface, who knew how many forces he had in secret? Could he easily act as he pleased? If the Crown Princess lost a strand of hair, His Highness the Crown Prince probably wouldn't take things lying down. Chapter 2972. Gowen was usually a coward, but she was too angry today. She was so angry that she wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with Arbor. Now that she was reminded by the secret guard, she also felt a little regretful. But the order had already been given. If she repeated it in 3 seconds, would she still want her face as Madame Gowen? She turned her head and glared at the secret guard in front of her fiercely and shouted angrily, "Are you not even going to listen to my orders?" There was a hint of threat in her fierce eyes. Their lives were firmly in her hands. Don't forget that when they became secret guards, they had all handed over a wisp of their life souls to her. This also meant that no matter how high these people achieved in the future and how far they could go, even if they broke through the deity realm or even reached the transcendent realm, they would still only be her servants. She held all of their lives in her hands. If she wanted them to live, they would live. If she wanted them to die, they would die. This was no joke. Although the secret guard's face was covered, his body stiffened slightly. Madame Gowen looked at them with a smug expression. "Why aren't you attacking?" The 5 secret guards surrounded Arbor and gritted their teeth. They could only accept the order and go forward to besiege her. Each of them summoned a large spirit beast beside them and pounced over without any explanation. Arbor's expression was calm. There was no anger. They were just serving their own masters. Since these people were working for Madame Gowen, they naturally accepted her orders immediately. However, since they chose to attack her, she was not a good-natured person. She would show mercy and let them go. Since they were standing on the opposite side, then it was either you die or you die. Arbor looked coldly at these secret guards who had summoned their spirit beasts and rushed forward. She muttered, "Rustle, rustle." The soil under her feet immediately rolled up. For a moment, the ground that was originally paved with bricks bulged up. With that, a giant pincer suddenly emerged from the ground and snapped the neck of one of the spirit beasts. The secret guard who was closely related to this spirit beast did not understand what was going on at that time. He felt a surge of pain in his consciousness and spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion also withered. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. What kind of monster was this? It killed a spirit beast as soon as it appeared. What a powerful combat strength. The giant sand scorpion's huge head popped out from under the tumbling rocks. It waved its pincers and swept towards the limbs of a spirit beast next to it. The spirit beast was clearly frightened by its imposing manner. It spread its 4 hooves and cried out in alarm as it hurriedly ran out of the small courtyard. Arbor stared coldly at the people in front of him. He waved his hand and smirked. Everyone only heard rustling sounds coming from all directions, and an inexplicable sense of foreboding arose in their hearts. "What is it?" Madame Gowen couldn't help but cry out, tightly clinging to the arm of the man beside her. "Scorpion, scorpion. There are so many scorpions." One of the hidden guards lost his composure and cried out in panic. Madame Gowen turned around to take a look. Goosebumps instantly appeared on her skin, and her scalp became slightly numb. Countless sand scorpions, each about the size of an adult's fist, crawled out of the small courtyard from all directions. 5th young Master Qin's scalp also exploded. He was still sitting on the ground right now. What if these scorpions couldn't differentiate between friend and foe? Chapter 2973. As it turned out, 5th young master was truly overthinking things. Seeing those little things swiftly crawling around him, 5th young Master Qin's eyes revealed slight astonishment. It turned out that these scorpions could really distinguish between friend and foe. In reality, those scorpions might not be large in size, but each of them was a spirit beast that had awakened intelligence, so they naturally understood the giant sand scorpion's commands. Seeing that the scorpion swarm was about to spread to their feet, Madame Gowan started panicking. She tightly clutched the man's arm and shrieked, "What do we do? What do we do now?" "Madam, the situation is not in our favor. We had better retreat first," that man hastily said. What kind of joke was this? If they were caught in the scorpion swarm, who knew if they would be gnawed until not even a bone would be left? Madame Gowan was already panicking to the max at this time, so she nodded when she heard this. She directly pulled that robust man and turned around, abandoning her armor and leaving. The sand scorpion swarm engulfed several spirit beasts that were relatively slow to escape like a tide. After the scorpion swarm had spread, only a few spirit beast skulls were left on the ground. Miss Chiao stood in the middle of the scorpion swarm, looking indifferently at Madame Gowan, who had escaped in a crooked manner and had to activate several teleportation talismans in succession before finally escaping the scorpion swarm's encirclement. A cold glint flitted across her eyes. At this time, Madame Gowan was wiping her cold sweat as she heaved a sigh of relief while repeatedly panting. Thankfully, these things weren't too fast. They didn't catch up. The robust man nodded. Suddenly, his gaze fixed on the back of her neck, and he said in a slightly trembling voice, "Madam, don't move." "HM?" Madame Gowan glanced at him in confusion. Seeing that his gaze was fixed on her, she couldn't help throwing him a coquettish glance. "Idiot, what are you staring at me for?" Madame Gowan glanced at her figure narcissistically, and she suddenly caught a glimpse of a small black snake from the corner of her eye. She turned around in horror. The little black snake, which had been lying softly on the back of her collar, suddenly raised its head and tried to bite her nose. Ugh! Madame Gowan let out an extremely tragic shriek. Far away in the small courtyard, fifth young Master Qin couldn't help but shudder slightly. The old woman's scream was too tragic. It was as if she had been stung by a bee's tail. Her scream was earth-shattering. Xiao Mu fished out some medicinal powder and sprinkled it among the small scorpions. Those scorpions seemed to be overjoyed, and they all swarmed forward, crawling in and out around Xiao Mu in layers. Fifth young Sir Qin couldn't help shuddering, only feeling that the little lady before him was simply abnormal. Miss Chiao expressionlessly fed the little scorpions before returning them to Shaji Planet. The giant sand scorpion crawled over and obediently lay down beside Arbor. The scorpion's head, which should have been very ferocious, now seemed to be engraved with the word obedient. When fifth young Master Qin saw this scene, he couldn't help but raise his head again to glance at Arbor. Arbor happened to look in his direction and muttered, "Troublesome." He took a few steps forward and threw a bottle of liquid medicine on him. Fifth young master spent a lot of effort, but he still couldn't pull the cork off that bottle of liquid medicine. It was truly because he had been on tenterhooks for most of the night after Madame Gowan brought him here, and he was mentally and physically exhausted. Chapter 2974. On top of that, he had been fed bone-softening powder and drugged with aphrodisiac earlier, so his body was already in a half-crippled state. Now, he couldn't even open a tiny medicine bottle. Fifth young Master Qin subconsciously clenched his fist tightly, not even noticing that his fingers had left bloody marks on his palm. Arbor glanced at this person in a bad mood and muttered, "Troublesome again." The little fellow walked up and bent down to snatch that medicine bottle from his hand. She directly pulled out the cork and squatted next to him. She turned his flushed face around with one hand and very roughly poured the medicinal liquid into his mouth with the other. The zither Shio's heart skipped a beat, and he felt that the little lady's ice-cold hand was actually a bit frightening. "Take half a bottle of antidote a day, and take it for 2 days." After Miss Chiao expressionlessly said this, she picked fifth young Master Qin up from the ground. "Don't forget the 1,000,000 spirit coins and tearless grass." Fifth young Master Qin was filled with displeasure, and he raised his head with difficulty to glance at her. Why do you dislike me? Because I'm a cripple?" He could tell that the little stoic was completely blunt with him, and it could even be said that she simply couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. This attitude was completely different from how she spoke to people like Qi Xianxian. Even though her eternally unchanging stoic expression seemed to be frozen in time, he could clearly tell that whether it was her conversational attitude or tone, it was vastly different from Qi Xianxian and the rest. "What does it have to do with me whether you're a cripple or not?" Miss Qiao irritably retorted. She couldn't be bothered to meddle in their Qin estate's affairs. If she hadn't happened to run into them today, she wouldn't have gone to look for them at all. To put it bluntly, the Qin estate's 5th Qin and Ming province's Ming Bao had nothing to do with her at all. Arbor lowered his head to glance at the person in his hand and creased his brows in displeasure. So troublesome, he still had to carry this person back to the academy to exchange for mission points. Fortunately, this trip wasn't completely fruitless. At least, he managed to capture the naughty tree seed fragments. Just as Arbor walked out of the courtyard with 5th Qin, he bumped into eldest young Sir Qin, who had come after hearing the news. Eldest young master was stunned at first, but then he smiled like a flower and waved the small fan in his hand. My Jojo, it's a small world indeed. The two of us are really fated." Arbor rolled his eyes at him. He wanted to walk around him, but when he saw the person in his hand, he hurriedly threw him over. "I'll return it to you." Xiaomu didn't say anything else and turned to leave after throwing him out. "Remember to settle the account by tomorrow." 5th young Master Qin's complexion was a bit dark, and he only managed to stabilize himself after his eldest brother reached out to support him. When he turned around, he could only see the back of the little fellow's head. What a heartless and callous fellow. 5th young Sir Qin gnashed his teeth and clenched his fists. All he could see was that bit of spirit coins. "Oh my Jojo, why are you running so fast?" Eldest young Sir Qin blinked, and his figure flashed as he caught up to Arbor's footsteps. Subsequently, he reached out to stop her. A chance encounter is better than an invitation. See, our fate isn't shallow. How about this? Let's have a meal together. Who wants to have a meal with you? Arbor looked at eldest young Sir expressionlessly. I've been fasting recently. Impossible. Eldest young Sir shook his head vigorously. You can't do without 3 meals a day. Arbor. Chapter 2975. This person in front of her was really asking for a beating. Madame Jojo felt an itch in her little hands. As though he had seen through her intentions, eldest young Master Qin deliberately took a few steps forward and grinned in front of Arbor. Jojo, look. In any case, we're from the same star domain. Don't keep pushing me away like this. Arbor couldn't be bothered to say anything more to him and slid past him. Unexpectedly, she moved quickly, but this guy Qin Xian was even faster. No matter how she moved, he was like a hot potato that stuck to her hand and couldn't be shaken off. No matter how much she tried to get away from him, he always stayed by her side. The little fellow could see his grinning face when she turned around, and she couldn't resist swinging her little hand at his head. What are you doing? Arbor angrily threw a punch, but eldest young Master Qin hastily reached out to block it. Jojo, you saved our family's old fifth. Eldest young Master Qin said with a smile. I have to show some appreciation, right? No need for appreciation. Miss Qiao waved her small hand. Just settle the consultation fee you owe me as soon as possible. Eldest young Master Qin silently twitched his mouth, and he turned to look at his pale-faced fifth brother. Jojo, look at Xiu's current condition. It's not good. You can't leave him to die. Let's find a place to sit down and have a meal first, then you can treat him properly. Eldest young Master Qin grinned and winked. Don't worry. I won't shortchange you for a single cent of the consultation fee. Arbor glared at him when she saw that this person refused to let go and had a rascal expression that said, I won't let you go until you treat my fifth brother. Eldest young Master Qin smiled fawningly at her. Jojo, let's go. Eldest young Master Qin flashed to fifth young master's side and nodded at him to support him. Old Fifth's health hadn't improved ever since he was drugged and tortured by that old fogey from the National Security Agency. He had taken plenty of medicine at home to recuperate, but the results weren't good. Now that he had the opportunity to grab little Jojo and show him to Lao Wu, it was naturally a good thing. Eldest young Master Chin was very confident in Arbor's medical skills. The three of them left the alley where the villa was located and circled around to the street. They found a relatively quiet restaurant and walked in. Arbor checked Chin Xiu's pulse expressionlessly and then said, "Just take the medicine I gave you on time." "Really?" Eldest young Sir Chin sat on the side, propping up his chin with one hand as he gazed unblinkingly at the little stoic. He said with a grin, "Jojo, my fifth brother was previously assassinated by that old woman from the state security. You know how many kinds of drugs you have in your body?" Fifth young Master Chin's handsome face flushed red, and he turned his head to look at his big brother who didn't watch his mouth. Was he really his biological brother? Sir Jojo's face was cold. He sat upright and still and said expressionlessly, "I don't understand." Eldest young Master Chin. Fifth young Master Chin glanced speechlessly at his elder brother. "Eldest brother. Last time at Langfang she was the one who helped." Eldest young Master Chin turned to look at his younger brother. "Ah, that's right, Physician Chang also mentioned it to me last time. Qiao Qiao was the one who cured you in Langfang. Then that's it. Jojo must be very familiar with your illness. Jojo, how do you think my fifth brother's illness needs treatment to be completely eradicated?" Chapter 2976. Arbor glared at him impatiently. "Why are you so long-winded? I already said that he only needs to finish taking the medicine I gave him, and he'll be completely cured." Why did he have to ask the same question again and again? He was simply trying to find a topic to talk about. The little fellow felt that her saliva was about to dry up from explaining to this person. It was incredibly annoying. She picked up a cup of tea and took a sip before continuing expressionlessly, "The messy medicinal powder in your younger brother's body has already been neutralized, so it won't cause him any major harm in the future. On the other hand, his internal organs have accumulated quite a bit of cold, heat, and evil qi. It hasn't been accumulated for a long time. He should take more licorice and other things and train his body. He shouldn't look so weak that he'll be blown away by a gust of wind. Bones and muscles can all be trained. Even if he's just a mortal, it's essential to strengthen the body. If he's this weak, it'll be difficult for him to even leave behind a descendant. Could it be that he wants to be an embroidered pillow that looks good on the outside but is useless?" Cough, 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 cough. Eldest young Sir Chin choked on his tea and lowered his head to cough violently several times. On the other hand, fifth young Sir Chin, who was sitting on the side, was alternately stifled and agitated by Arbor's words. His pair of beautiful, moist eyes stared fixedly at Arbor, so angry that he was speechless. Not only was this young lady savage, but she also had a venomous tongue. She spoke for half a day and insulted him from beginning to end. One moment she said he was weak, and the next moment she said he was an embroidered pillow. She was openly and covertly insulting him. Also, she was a young lady, yet she talked about a man's descendant with an expressionless face. Didn't she think it was too much? Arbor glanced indifferently at the fifth young sir and took out a small box the size of a ring from his pocket. He pushed it in front of the fifth young sir and turned to ask the eldest young sir, "Do you have white maple in your family other than tearless grass? Take out some if you have it. This walnut pill isn't for sale to the outside world." The little stoic said expressionlessly, "It can nourish the blood, nourish the marrow, and strengthen the muscles and bones. It's suitable for you." In the end, she still wanted him to nourish his body. Was he that weak in her eyes? The fifth young master was so angry that he was speechless. Eldest young master's mouth twitched. He took out several herbs from his inner world and placed them in front of Arbor. The little stoic reached out to take them and unceremoniously accepted them all. She glanced at eldest young master and felt that she had taken many things from him. Then she kindly asked fifth young master, "Do you want the dragon tendon bone repairing pill?" The fifth young master was enraged. Scram. On the side, eldest young Sir Chin couldn't help but cover his face. My God, his gentle and elegant fifth brother was actually angered by a little girl to the point of spouting such malicious words. There was really no one else like him, humph. The little stoic snorted coldly and then stood up to stride away. The eldest young master hurriedly stood up as well. He stopped the little girl and said with a smile, "Jojo, let's eat before you leave. Don't be angry. Things haven't been going well for our fifth brother recently, and he's not in a good mood." "I'm in an even worse mood." Sir Jojo grumpily turned his small head away, but then his eyes suddenly lit up. He saw Emolien's figure appear at the restaurant's entrance extremely quickly and arrive in front of them in less than a second. Sir Jojo happily bounced to his side. "Lien, where did you go just now? You still dare to talk about it?" Emolien was enraged at the mention of this. Chapter 2977. That fragment little four was truly a good-for-nothing. Not only did he throw him out of the boundary, but he was also thoughtless enough to directly throw him out of Wind Thunder City. He made him run all the way back and even wasted some time. Arbor raised his hand to touch his handsome face that was somewhat frozen from the cold wind the entire way. Seeing his dark face, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Where did little four throw you to?" "Outside the city." Arbor blinked. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you." Emolien nodded, feeling a bit angry when she thought of that swindler. Greetings to the Crown Prince. As soon as Emolien turned around, she met Qin Xian's spurious gaze, and she immediately became displeased. Why was this guy here? It couldn't be that he harbored some unrealistic thoughts about his wifey, right? Emolien reflexively grasped Arbor's small hand tightly. She looked at Qin Xian and Qin Xiu with a cold face, then her gaze paused on Qin Xiu, and she asked in surprise, "Jojo, you found fifth Qin?" "That's right." Arbor nodded his small head. "I found him by chance not long after we came out of the boundary." Emolien recalled Qi Xuanxuan's previous words and felt that her Qiao was indeed an extremely lucky person. "Jojo, then you can go to the mission center to exchange your points after we return." Emolien grasped his small hand. "Let's go back to the academy." Since they found him, there was naturally no need to stay in the inner city. Fifth young Master Qin pursed his lips and didn't say anything, but his gaze swept over Emolien very coldly. As expected, in these people's eyes, he, a good-for-nothing, was merely an item needed to provide mission points. The little stoic was greedy and sharp-tongued, but most importantly, she was vain. Looking at it now, this stoic face's taste wasn't that great. She probably followed the Crown Prince because of his noble status and wanted to curry favor with him. The little stoic was disinclined to care about what fifth young Master Qin was thinking. Her husband pulled her small hand, and the two of them walked towards the staircase. Qin Xian sighed and looked at the backs of the two people as they left. His gaze was somewhat complicated. "I want to eat wontons." Emolien lowered her head and smiled at her. "I'll cook it for you when we get back." Sir Jojo nodded. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, "By the way, did that holy Sun Mi Yen say when he will set off for the secret realm?" 3 days later. Emolien smiled. "Do you want to fuse with the fragment little four?" Arbor shook his head. "Let little four play for a while. Whether it wants to merge with Chio or not, it's up to it." Emolien raised her hand and stroked her little head. "The Sun Moon Temple is near the Red River Canyon. We have to take the water route to get there. Just the Du Chunjiang alone will take about a day's journey. Flying is naturally prohibited above the Du Chunjiang." Arbor immediately looked at him curiously and asked, "Why is it prohibited from flying?" Emolien shook his head. "I don't know. It's been like this for years. Some people also say that it's because there are immortals in the river with boundless magic power living under the water. If cultivators who pass by dare to use their spiritual power to forcefully ascend into the air, they will be destroyed without a trace." Arbor curiously followed Emolien out of the restaurant, and the two of them headed for the Royal Academy. Before they could walk 2 steps, Arbor suddenly stopped and shouted, "Oh no, I forgot to bring my points back." "What points?" "Wait for me." Arbor's figure flashed, and he once again returned to that small restaurant. Chapter 2978. In less than a few seconds, Arbor ran out with a person in her arms, and our dear Qin Xian chased after her, both amused and exasperated. Jojo, you can't be like this." Eldest young Sir Qin wordlessly followed after her and reached out to rescue fifth young Sir Qin, whose complexion had darkened. Prince Mo's handsome face also darkened, and he hugged the little fellow to his side while kicking fifth young Sir Qin in passing. In the blink of an eye, Qin Xian hastily pulled his younger brother back and dodged that kick. Then, he glared at Prince Imo and said irritably, "Your Highness, my younger brother is only a mortal. How can he end up well after you kick him?" Sir Qiao Qiao took a step forward and said seriously, "Are you thinking of robbing our Sikong Star Battle Team's mission points?" Qin Xian was even more speechless. "No. Don't worry, you're the one who earned the points. I absolutely won't interfere. Hey, no one's fighting with you over it." Arbor nodded and extended a fair and tender small hand with a serious expression that said, "I have to bring the points back." If it weren't for the little stoic's expression being too serious, the three men would have thought she was joking. It turned out that this little fellow was serious. She seriously wanted to bring the points back to the academy. Mo Lian's eyebrows twitched and she coughed lightly and said, "Actually, Fifth Qin only needs to report to the mission center after returning. There really isn't a need to trouble your dainty hand to carry him back to the academy." Lady Qiao Qiao blinked her eyes and retracted her hand. She then looked at the three of them with an expressionless face. Her face was serious and serious. If it weren't for his fifth brother's truly ugly expression, eldest young Sir Qin would have burst into laughter. This little thing was still so amusing. At this time, Arbor also realized that she had made a blunder, but her stoic face absolutely wouldn't let others see any trace of vexation. The next day, Ling Gu dragged a large cart full of spirit coins to the entrance of Donglin Garden. She instructed the servants to move boxes of spirit coins from the cart and pile them up in the courtyard. When Xiaomu came out, she saw that the entire courtyard was piled up to the brim. The little fellow casually flipped through them and turned to look at Ling Gu, who was looking up at the sky. "Why did you send so many?" In terms of medicinal ingredients, eldest young Master Qin Xian had given her enough yesterday. All that was left was 1,000,000 spirit coins. So, he decided to pay them off. At this time, the things piled up in her courtyard were priceless gems and jade wares, expensive calligraphy and paintings, precious lingji mushrooms, and so on. There were hundreds of spirit coin chests, which added up to about 4 to 5 million spirit coins. Arbor glanced at Ling Gu and did not say anything. He took the 1,000,000 spirit coins and turned around to leave. "Hey, wait a moment." Ling Gu couldn't help but call out to her. She pointed at the other chests on the ground and said, "These are all gifted to you by my young master. I only take what I deserve." Xiao Mu threw down this sentence and entered the room by herself, not paying any more attention to him. After Ling Gu returned with her head drooped, she told fifth young Sir Qin everything that had happened. Fifth young Sir was so angry that the veins on his forehead were throbbing. This girl was pretending in front of him. She clearly loved money, but she didn't want it when he gave it to her. Fifth young Sir was fuming inside. When Ling Gu asked him with trepidation, "Young Sir, how should we deal with these?" Fifth young Sir sneered. "Burn them all." Chapter 2979. Although Ling Gu had a pained expression, since the young master had spoken, she could only do as he said. There were so many good things, such as lingji mushrooms and snow lotuses. The young master actually burned them all in a fit of anger. In the end, it was all that stoic-faced girl's fault. She should have just accepted them properly. Ling Gu secretly raised her eyes to glance at the fifth young master. Seeing him enter with a cold expression, the door to the side room was tightly shut with a bam. At the same time, in a private residence in the inner city, Madame Gowen's ear-piercing curses could be heard. The maidservant Kai Hui pushed open the door with fear and trepidation. She was almost hit by a cup that flew straight at her. She quickly knelt on the ground and cried, "Madam, madam, please calm down. Why is it only you? Where's Kai Hui? Where did she go? I asked her to cook some bird's nest porridge. Why is she still missing? Is it because my words no longer have any effect now?" Kai Hui shuddered and quickly went forward on her knees to curry favor. "Madam, don't be angry. Later, Kai Hui will go to the small kitchen to take a look. Why aren't you going?" Madame Gowen roared angrily. Kai Hui shuddered and didn't dare to say anything. She quickly got up from the ground and walked backward to the door. "Wait, Madame Gowan coldly shouted with a gloomy expression. Yes, madam. Give me the bronze mirror over there. Madame Gowan said again with a gloomy expression, unwilling to give up. Just now, she had already taken several kinds of pills to restore her appearance. Thinking about it, it should have taken effect by now. Kai Hui shuddered and quickly advised softly, Madam, it's better for you to recuperate peacefully now. Give it to me. Madame Gowan's expression instantly changed, as if she was very dissatisfied with Kai Hui for daring to refute her to her face. Kai Hui quickly crawled over, took out a bronze mirror, and handed it to Madame Gowan. Madame Gowan took a deep breath and looked at herself in the bronze mirror. She almost fainted from what she saw. His originally tender and fair face was now darker than charcoal, as if he had been roasted in a furnace for several days. It was so dark that it was almost comical. He also had a big red nose with a black malignant tumor growing on the tip of his nose. It was as big as half a finger and was extremely conspicuous. Madame Gowan was so angry that she threw the bronze mirror to the ground and threw everything around her that could be thrown. She couldn't believe that even after her emergency treatment, her face was still affected by the poison. That damned little black snake. Of all the places it could bite, it actually bit her nose. Arbor, Arbor, I'm going to kill you, Arbor. Arbor! Mrs. Gowan screamed as she fell and hit the ground. Her hatred for Arbor had reached its peak. Kai Hui didn't dare to be rash. She stood to the side timidly, not daring to say anything. What are you waiting for? Invite the best alchemists and alchemists in the city. She wanted to treat her face. How was she going to go out and meet people with such a dark and poisoned face? Kai Hui hurriedly got up from the ground and rushed out of the door. The current madam was really too scary. She could explode in anger at any time and vent the depression in her heart on any little girl. She didn't want to become that unlucky cannon fodder. Chapter 2980. 3 days later. Prince Zheng's estate, Princess Consort. A young maidservant with a long face and slender eyebrows quickly walked into the main hall and bowed to Shi Yongyan, who was sitting at the head of the table. How is it? Shi Yongyan used a wet handkerchief to lightly wipe the pastry crumbs from the corner of her mouth as she asked with an indifferent gaze. Prince has invited all the famous doctors in the imperial capital, saying that he wants to diagnose young Master Hua. That maidservant cleverly moved forward and lowered her voice to speak to Shi Yongyan. All the famous doctors are helpless. Shi Yongyan sneered indifferently and gently put down the teacup in her hand. She stood up and said, Let's go to the Hua courtyard to take a look at second young master's condition. A moment later, Shi Yongyan had just stepped into the Hua courtyard with her maidservant Fu, when they heard loud cries from inside, mixed with Su Shihua's father's angry yell. Kong, are you just going to watch someone beat your younger brother like this? Who exactly is your biological brother? Don't you feel distressed seeing Hua in such a half-dead state? No. Bring father into the palace immediately. I want to see His Majesty. I want to explain this situation to His Majesty. Su Shihua's father cursed. Why can he do whatever he wants just because he's the crown prince? How can he beat my Hua into such a state? My Hua. Shi Yongyan's eyes revealed traces of mockery. This family was truly too amusing. There was actually such a brainless fellow who wanted to enter the palace to reason with His Majesty? Father. Mo Shikong's tired voice came from inside the room. Shi Yongyan had someone push open the door forcefully. She strode in with her head held high and her back ramrod straight. Prince, you wouldn't be so muddle-headed as to listen to your father's words and bring him into the palace to see His Majesty and plan to complain about His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Woman, do you have any manners? Why did you come in so rashly? Su Shitao turned back from the bedside and glared at Shi Yongyan. She had never been on good terms with her sister-in-law. Ever since she, her parents, and her second brother came to the Zheng Palace, she felt that she was under her sister-in-law's control. She even had to look at her sister-in-law's face when it came to food, clothing, and other necessities. This made her feel very unhappy every time. Mo Shikong looked at his wife unhappily. Yongyan, what kind of attitude is this? Your Highness, honest words are unpleasant to the ear and beneficial to your actions. Please don't think that this concubine's words are unpleasant to hear. Shi Yongyan couldn't help but sneer. If you insist on doing things your own way and insist on bringing father-in-law to the palace to complain, then you'll have no choice but to do so. I'm afraid that you will soon be implicated by your short-sighted father. What kind of person was His Majesty? How could His Majesty be in the mood to listen to you? Moreover, His Highness the Crown Prince was His Majesty's biological son, his biological son. What kind of father would not help his own son and even side with outsiders like them? So what if Su Shihua is dead? Could it be that their Zheng Palace was going to risk their lives against His Highness the Crown Prince for a mere Su Shihua? Wasn't this a joke? Shi Yongyan's gaze coldly stared at Su Shitao. Younger sister Tao, this matter was completely caused by you. You should properly reflect on yourself. You must not be so willful in the future. Su Shitao's eyes were red with anger. He stomped his feet and shouted, "Eldest brother!" Mo Shikong also stared at Shi Yongyan with an unhappy expression. He discovered that she seemed to have changed into a different person today. Her words were blunt and very impolite, making him somewhat embarrassed in front of his parents and younger sister. Chapter 2981. Shi Yongyan sighed and bowed to Mo Shikong. She said faintly, "Your Highness, please don't mind this concubine's words. Honest words are unpleasant to the ear. This concubine is completely thinking for the sake of your Highness. If today your Highness brought father-in-law into the palace to complain to His Majesty, how do you think His Majesty will deal with this matter?" Mo Shikong pursed his lips and didn't speak. Although he didn't speak, his heart was clearer than anyone else. His Majesty certainly wouldn't say anything. His Majesty secretly loved his son so much that he even gave such an important elite force like the Emperor's shadow guards to the Crown Prince. This was the difference between close and distant relatives. No matter how much Mo Shikong sacrificed and did, in His Majesty's heart, he was different from Mo Lian. "Your Highness, we can only use medicine to protect young Master Hua's heart for the time being, and then find a way to help him recuperate," an old doctor who took Su Shihua's pulse said. He injured his natal meridians, and his skin was severely burned by the fire. No one can guarantee whether he can wake up or not. Mo Shikong's face was very ugly. In fact, the words of these old doctors were basically the same as what the old doctors of the Imperial Academy said. This meant that Su Shihua himself couldn't possibly recover to his original state. After all, if it was him, Mo Shikong, who spat out that golden dragon fire, even he might not be able to completely withstand it, let alone Su Shihua, who was extremely arrogant at such a young age. Su Shihua had always thought that his own cultivation was considered outstanding among his peers. Xiao Mu had surpassed him and even defeated him effortlessly, making him feel emotionally and physically that he couldn't accept it at all. "Your Highness, you also heard the doctor's words just now. I hope you will consider it carefully." Shi Yongqian lowered her eyes. After saying this, she walked out of the door with her servant girl. Su He and his daughter were left angrily staring at Shi Yongqian's back. "Eldest brother, look at what sister-in-law said. How can she push all the blame onto me?" Su Shitao suppressed his anger and said, "This matter was clearly caused by that crown princess. The reason why second brother became like this was also because of her." Enough. Mo Shikong didn't want to listen to Su Shitao's nagging anymore, so he turned to Su He and said, "Dad, you heard what Wang Fei said just now. Second brother's current situation is very bad. Forcing him to stay will only add to his pain." Su He wished he could slap his eldest son's face. He glared at Mo Shikong and shouted at him, "Are you going to leave me to die? It's not like your brother can't be saved. You want to give up the treatment?" "Father." Mo Shikong knew that with his second brother's current state, his father and the others would definitely cry, make a fuss, and threaten to hang themselves, causing the entire Jing mansion to have no peaceful days. His heart was stifled, but he still said, "Father, I don't want to give up either, but the problem is that it's useless even if I don't give up. Second brother's injuries have already spread to his entire body, and all his internal organs have been damaged." When Su Shihua's mother, Liang Shi, heard this, she started sobbing softly. The more Su He listened to the crying, the more annoyed he became. He shouted at him, "Shut up. In any case, you must do your best to save Hua. If you can't, then enter the palace and ask His Majesty for the best medicine and the best doctor." Su, he said self-righteously, he was beaten by the crown prince. No matter what, His Majesty should do something. Chapter 2982. When Shi Yongyan received the news, she was almost angered into laughter by this naive eunuch's strange words. She really had the face to force her husband to go to the imperial palace to ask for a pharmacist and medicinal herbs? Could it be that the great emperor really didn't know that this had happened? The great emperor's spies were all over the divine continent. His Highness the Crown Prince had almost beaten Mo Shikong, this good-for-nothing younger brother of his, to death. How could the great emperor not know? The great emperor still hadn't said anything. What did that mean? That meant that he didn't want to care at all. It was hard for this Su He to keep saying that he wanted to go to the great emperor to complain. What did he want to complain about? He wanted to tell the great emperor, "Io, your son beat our Su family's child to death." It was simply ridiculous and brainless to the extreme. In front of Shi Yongyan stood two men in black who didn't speak with their hands hanging down. "Go," Shi Yongyan said faintly and put the porcelain cup in her hand on the table. A cold light flashed through her eyes. These two bodyguards trained by the Shi family were naturally very obedient to Shi Yongyan's words. The two people quietly came to Hua courtyard. Looking in from the side room's window, they saw Liang Shi crying and sitting by the bed to take care of her son. Su He and Su Shitao were no longer there. Zheng Wang should also be in the study at this time. One of them shot out spiritual power from his finger and pointed at Liang Shi, this ordinary person. Soon, they floated in through the window and saw Su Shihua lying on the bed like a charcoal on the verge of death. The two of them looked at each other, and then one of them nodded slightly at the other. They quickly walked forward and pulled up the brocade quilt that covered Su Shihua's body, and suddenly pressed it against his face. That bodyguard pressed one hand on Su Shihua's face. At first, Su Shihua didn't have any movement. Later, he slowly began to struggle. He was already burnt to a crisp. His breathing was faint and intermittent. If it wasn't for the doctors forcibly using medicine to keep him alive, he would have already died. At this time, with the brocade quilt on his face, he couldn't even breathe. Su Shihua struggled in the man's hands for less than a minute before he was completely powerless. After another 2 minutes, the Shi family's guard realized that his subordinate was completely motionless. Only then did he slowly loosen his grip and place 2 fingers on Su Shihua's neck to test him. He then turned around and nodded at the other guard. Not long after the two returned to report, before noon, Mo Shikong angrily came to Jing Yuan with a manservant called Xiao Bao to find her. As soon as Mo Shikong entered the room, he kicked the coffee table next to him and shouted angrily, "Shi Yongyan, did you do that to Hua?" Shi Yongyan looked at the man in front of her coldly. Princess Consort Jing was originally an average-looking person. In addition, her forehead was narrow and slightly sunken. Her nose was sharp and narrow, but her mouth was quite big. She was born with a mean and ungrateful appearance. No man would be satisfied with such a wife. If it weren't for the Shi family's wealth and influence, King Zheng wouldn't have been willing to marry such a wife. In the 3 years since the couple got married, they had always treated each other with respect. This was the first time the couple had met each other with red faces and thick necks. Mo Shikong looked at the woman's face in front of him and a trace of irritation and disgust flashed through his eyes. "Shi Yongyan, do you have no brain? Am I brainless, or is Wang Yi indecisive and doesn't know his limits?" Chapter 2983. Shi Yongyan looked at Mo Shikong calmly, but a complicated and disappointed look flashed across her eyes. She originally thought that the man she married was just not decisive in his actions, but now it seemed that he was simply soft-hearted and short-sighted. Ever since they found that disgusting family, King Zheng's residence had been in a lot of trouble. In fact, she really couldn't understand her husband's thoughts. In terms of blood ties, there was a slight connection. Blood ties were the deepest fetters that couldn't be severed from the beginning. But wouldn't it be ridiculous to talk about how deep blood ties were? King Zheng was an orphan since young. He followed Her Majesty the Empress from the age of 3 and was raised by her until he was a little over 10 years old. It could be said that King Jing spent much more time with Her Majesty than Her Majesty's biological son, Emolian. Ever since Her Majesty's accident 17 years ago, the entire Divine Prefecture was in turmoil for a period of time. In recent years, Divine Prefecture finally became peaceful, and their days slowly became better. King Zheng had been thinking about it since a few years ago and began to search for his family. Family? Shi Yongyan couldn't help but snort. It was simply ridiculous. What kind of family was a parent who could abandon you without hesitation when you were fleeing for your life when you were young? Instead of saying that the Su family brought their children to the imperial capital to search for their family, it was better to say that it was King Zheng who sent people to find their family and then brought them over to provide for them. Shi Yongyan really couldn't understand how much affection could there be between these so-called family members who had never lived together since young. However, King Zheng was a stubborn person who was foolishly filial to the extreme. You sent people to deal with my second brother, and now you dare to say such things. Do you really think I'm afraid of your Shi family? Your Highness. Shi Yongyan stood up from the chair and looked at him coldly. Yongyan is doing this for your Highness's sake. That Su Shihua is already in this state, and your Highness still wants to waste manpower, resources, and energy on him? In the end, not only will it be a waste of effort, but it will also drag down our entire residence. What kind of situation does your Highness think our residence is in now? From 3 days ago until now, your Highness, have you calculated how many spirit coins and herbs you have spent on that living corpse? There are so many people in the residence, and the expenses are already high. Your Highness, you also know that ever since you brought second brother and third sister over, the palace's expenses have increased by several times. If it wasn't for this concubine using the dowry stores to supplement the budget, do you think this palace would be able to survive? This is the reason why you sent someone to deal with my second brother. Emo Shikong trembled with anger. In your eyes, is that money more important than my second brother's life? Princess Consort Zheng used the handkerchief in her hand to wipe the corners of her mouth, and a cold smile appeared on her harsh face. The Prince of Zheng raised his hand and was about to slap Princess Consort Zheng's face. Princess Consort Zheng raised her head and looked at him coldly. If Prince continues to let Su Shihua drag things out, the entire prince's estate will be dragged to death sooner or later. I'm just helping His Highness solve a big problem. Could it be that Prince will really listen to father-in-law's words and enter the palace to ask His Majesty for medicinal herbs and pharmacists for the sake of Su Shihua, this living dead? Everything this concubine does is for the sake of your Highness. Your Highness insists on going against the Crown Prince for the sake of the Su family. The gains do not make up for the losses. Chapter 2984. Presumably, Your Highness has clearly seen His Highness the Crown Prince's temper after this period of time. Do you really think that you will have a good time after falling out with His Highness? Shi Yongyan clenched her fists tightly and did her best to control the anger that was swirling in the depths of her heart. There had to be a limit to being brainless, right? Mo Shikong furiously glared at the woman in front of him and suddenly recalled the icy words Mo Lien left behind before leaving. Be Prince Zheng properly. Be Prince Zheng properly. Damn it. Mo Shikong felt repulsed, irritated, and gloomy. His identity as Prince Zheng could really be removed at any time, right? Right now, Crown Prince Mo's words were like a sharp sword hanging over his head. It could drop down at any moment and snatch everything away from him, snatch it away. Mo Shikong had difficulty breathing, and his heart was so stifled that it was almost about to explode. He fiercely glared at Shi Yongyan before abruptly flinging his sleeves and turning to leave with large strides. If my parents ask about this matter, you can explain it to them yourself. Princess Consort Zheng was so angry that she plopped down on the wooden armchair. Her chest heaved up and down as she panted heavily. In the end, it was her, the wife, who was in the wrong. Could it be that everything she did was not for the sake of Prince Zheng and Prince Zheng's estate? On Lady Jojo's end, she naturally did not know that after Mo Shikong brought Su Shihua back to the imperial capital, He went through a lot of trouble to find someone to treat him and caused a great commotion in Prince Zheng's estate. Even if she knew, she would probably just purse her lips and say, "It's a waste of effort." As for 7th Yen, this little fellow, although his dragon form was nothing special, his strength absolutely could not be underestimated. The little fellow was still in the late-stage infant stage and had yet to enter the growth stage. If he spat out a mouthful of blazing dragon's breath, he could definitely kill a level 15 great spiritual master. Lady Jojo was completely uninterested in what Prince Zheng's estate was up to. She, Emo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others were ready to set off early in the morning and arrived at the learning area plaza. Leading a row of white-robed priests, Holy Sun Mi Yen was already standing at the front of the square, on the most eye-catching arena. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and he had a compassionate expression on his face. It was as if he was shrouded in holy light just by standing there. Arbor secretly rolled his eyes, then turned to Prince Emo and whispered, "Did they say when they would depart?" Prince Emo knew that the little fellow was a little impatient, and could not help but secretly hold back his laughter, saying softly, "For this trip, other than the two of us, we will also select 30 people from the academy to go with us. We will probably only depart when everyone is present." Little Fatty, who was known for his information, squeezed his way forward and said, "Hey, I heard that there are more than 30 people from our academy." This time, the Sun Moon Temple was especially generous. Not only did they choose 30 people from our academy, but they also chose 30 people from our academy. It seems like they've even selected some students from other academies. In addition, they seem to have selected some people with special talents from the Divine Land and brought them along. Little Fatty rubbed his chin and muttered, "I suspect that this trip will definitely be dangerous. Is everyone here? Let's start the roll call now. Mu Roxuan. Gui Xuan. Long Min." On the side, the little priestess added with a grin, "Those whose names are called, please walk to the front." Chapter 2985. Zhongli Jiwei. Chen Baojia. The young men and women whose names were called each gracefully flew onto the large stage and stood still, their expressions rather complacent. But that was to be expected. To be able to break through the top 30 rankings in the previous arena competition, not only did they have strength, but luck was also indispensable. The little stoic expressionlessly looked at them. When Nether Leopard's name was announced, everyone was stunned and whispered to each other for a while. Soon after, they saw a person jump up from the back of the crowd like a monkey and rapidly run up the large stage. "Excuse me, excuse me. Thank you, excuse me." Ming Bao ran up the stage with a grin and cupped his hands at Chen Baojia, Zhongli Jiwei, and the others standing next to him. Chen Baojia swept him a glance and deliberately leaned closer to Zhongli Jiwei, muttering softly, "I wonder who he is. Everyone is outside looking for him like a net, but he's actually enjoying the show and doesn't mind it blowing up." Previously, everyone thought that Ming Bao was the same as 5th young Master Qin and was abducted while shopping in the inner city. In the end, reality proved that this guy had gone crazy from playing and forgot to return to the academy. Although the vice president had already harshly reprimanded him, the students who went out to look for him were all very gloomy and dissatisfied. They only felt that this guy was too unreliable and didn't know his limits at all. The students of the Divine Province and Sangzhou kept muttering in their hearts, "As expected, an uncivilized place like Ming Province produces all these baffling talents." "His Highness Yasi is coming down," someone called out softly. Everyone's gazes turned to the steps. Arbor and Emolien's group were standing in the front row, so Ming Yasi naturally saw them when he passed by. This was Miss Qiao's first time seeing Ming Province's crown prince after returning. Seeing that his complexion was a bit pale, as expected, he looked like he had just recovered from a serious illness. The strangest thing was that one of Ming Yasi's arms also seemed to be broken, and it was still tied up in a sling. Ming Yasi's gaze coldly swept over Emolien. Sir Jojo also couldn't resist raising her small head to look at her husband. Earlier, her husband had said that he had left behind a wisp of his divine soul and led a group of hidden guards to cause trouble for Ming Yas. Her husband also said that he would beat Ming Yas up to the point where he wouldn't be able to get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. Looking at it now, it was true. Although Yas could walk normally now, his arm was still broken. Judging from the state he was in 3 days ago, he might be in an even worse state. Jojo silently retracted his gaze and waited for the priestess to call the 30 students onto the stage. Holy Sun Mayan said reluctantly, "Crown Prince of Godly Land and Crown Princess, please come up." The little fellow held her husband's hand and stomped up the arena. She asked impatiently, "When are we leaving?" They were so long-winded and even held a roll call ceremony. The efficiency of the Sun Moon Temple was really bad. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at her with a fake smile. Then he ignored the little girl's question and said in a deep voice, "In this trip to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm, there are dangers as well as opportunities. There are some things that I want to make clear to everyone before we leave. If everyone is willing to go to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm with the temple, please sign an oath first. I guarantee that if there are any dangers on this trip, I will take full responsibility." "Our temple won't take any responsibility," Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly. Chapter 2986. Sure enough, the Sun Moon Temple was crafty enough. They wanted to be a hands-off shopkeeper and not manage the accounts at all. Because among the people heading to the Sun Moon Secret Realm, there were the Crown Prince of the Divine Province, Prince Chun of the Tsang Province, and the Crown Prince of the Ming Province, as well as many outstanding disciples from large patrician families. It was hard to guarantee that if something happened to these people, the elders of their families wouldn't vent their anger on the temple because of these disciples. The Sun Moon Temple was naturally not that stupid, nor did they want to directly face the wrath of the emperors of the 3 provinces, so they thought of this method in advance. If they signed an oath, then they would naturally bear the full responsibility if something happened to them, and it would have nothing to do with the temple. Zhongli Jiwei's eyes flickered slightly, and then she said faintly, "In that case, even if we encounter danger in the secret realm, the temple won't lend us a helping hand?" Chen Baojia also couldn't help but chuckle. The temple truly has a good plan. Sir Jojo took the oath from the temple's priest and glanced at it before throwing it on the ground with a plop. Holy Sun Mi Yen was infuriated by the little stoic's attitude. Ignoring the priest's tugging, he turned to glare at Jojo. "What, you don't want to enter the secret realm? What kind of bullshit oath is this?" Qi Xianxian grumpily shouted from the side, "What do you mean by life and death in the secret realm, and the temple won't take responsibility if you encounter danger? And this. Those who enter but aren't disciples of the temple can only choose to bring out one secret treasure when they come out of the secret realm. The rest of the treasures must be handed over to the temple." "Bah, you're so shameless." Qi Xianxian rolled her eyes and snorted. "You want to find people to work for your temple again, but you won't give them any benefits. No one is a freaking fool." Holy Sun Mi Yan's face darkened, and he said indifferently, "After entering the secret realm, life and death are naturally up to fate. This time, the temple isn't only bringing in 32 Royal Academy students. In addition, there are also dozens of students from several different academies in the 3 provinces. In addition, we have recruited many talents from Ming Province, the Divine Province, Tsang Province, and even several large tribes outside the 3 provinces to enter the secret realm together. After entering, everyone must temporarily obey orders until we give everyone time to act separately. This is not an oath written specifically for a student of the royal school." Holy Sun Mi Yen says coldly, "Instead, every non-believer of my shrine has to sign such an oath before entering the secret territory. In other words, if you don't want to sign, then don't go." Everyone had spent so much effort and finally obtained a precious spot. How unwilling would they be to give it up now? "Bullshit," the little stoic said indifferently, and everyone's gazes uniformly shifted to her. The little fellow was too lazy to speak, so she tugged at her husband's sleeve. Mo Lian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she still said, "The 2 of us are using our spots to exchange for the life of your holy maiden. Don't forget. This oath is not an oath. We will not sign it." Mo Lian said indifferently, "If you don't bring us in, then hand over your holy maiden." Kill her." Arbor nodded his small head and said seriously. Holy Sun Mi Yen was so infuriated by these two that his heart and lungs hurt. Chapter 2987. The rest of the people looked at the divine land crown prince and the crown princess with a strange expression, and they secretly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yan's face. Arbor would be stupid to sign that oath. It was clearly written in the oath that she had to hand over all her treasures, and only one could be kept. But how could she hand over the treasure that was in Sir Jojo's pocket? That was just bullshit. Although she wasn't sure if this oath would have any binding effect on her galaxy. Why would she take the risk? She and her lotus were the two places that the people of the Divine Hall used to buy the lives of the Holy Nun. She had to figure out what a bunch of muddle-headed guys were thinking. Holy Sun Mi Yen glared at Arbor angrily. After a while, he squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Isn't the matter of the Holy Nun already over? Little Crown Princess turned hostile and stared coldly at Holy Sun Mi Yen, saying, I don't want to turn the page now. What can you do to me? What a load of nonsense. Shut up. Arbor roared at him impatiently, and then shouted into the air, Where are the guards of the Crown Princess? Everyone twitched the corners of their mouths inexplicably. Bam, 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 bam. Several figures immediately flew out from their hiding places and stood in a row behind Little Crown Princess. Go and return the mining rights contract of Chess Mountain Spiritual Mine to the Divine Hall. By the way, capture that Yaoguang Holy Nun for me, the Crown Princess. I, the Crown Princess, want her to die right now. Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing, and the others expressed their helplessness at the same time. Their Lord Xiao Qiao was truly a strange little fellow. She could really turn hostile without any hesitation and didn't care about Holy Sun Mi Yan's old face at all. Holy Sun Mi Yan only felt that the anger in his chest was about to erupt like a volcano. He looked around and saw that the other 30 people on the stage didn't say anything. Instead, they were all looking at him as if they were watching a show. It seemed that regardless of whether or not any of them had any grudges with the Little Crown Princess, everyone's thoughts were the same at this moment. They were all standing by the side of the Little Crown Princess who had turned hostile. Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath. Call them back. Seeing that those one-track-minded hidden guards were really going to capture Yaoguang Saintus, Holy Sun Mi Yen was so furious that his lungs were about to explode. His mouth trembled as he couldn't help but roar. What? The two of you are under special circumstances, so you don't have to sign it. However, the others... Oath! Xiao Mu hollered at the flabbergasted young priest. The priest's hand trembled, and he quickly handed a new oath to Arbor. The little stoic expressionlessly skimmed through it again. Then, she took out a cinnabar brush from her inner world and circled a few words on that oath before making a cross. You can be responsible for your own life and death, but the others must move together with you and listen to your commands. There's no need for bullshit like that. After entering the secret realm, each of you will act separately. If you can, then you can. If you can't, then go and capture that Yaoguang Saintus. What are you waiting for? Enough! Holy Sun Mi Yen tore off that refined and noble appearance of his and roared furiously, If you want to act separately, then so be it. Do you think that the temple has to go with you? You can only take one treasure from the secret realm. This condition absolutely couldn't be reduced. End of the 6th watch. Chapter 2988. Arbor pursed her small lips and looked at the red-faced Holy Sun Mi Yen. She humphed and said, Ridiculous. She had to argue with Sir Jojo until her face turned red. It was truly too boring. Sir Jojo originally didn't want to insult her, but she had to come to her and beg to be insulted. Holy Sun Mi Yan's chest felt stifled, and he didn't want to continue looking at the little stoic. After everyone successfully signed that oath, Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't resist looking at Arbor and Emolien. The more he looked, the more he found them pleasing to the eye. These two people didn't sign an oath, so they naturally weren't bound by the laws of heaven and earth. If they found more than one treasure in the secret realm, wouldn't that be letting these two people off easy papa? Holy Sun Mi Yen immediately tossed this thought to the back of his mind. How could they have such great luck? It was already pretty good to be able to find one or two treasures in a secret realm filled with traps. Although these two people's cultivations weren't bad, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be abused by the secret realm's traps, formations, and spirit beasts. Humph humph. Holy Sun Mi Yen held his head high and plastered that holy and haughty mask on again. He said gravely to everyone, "Since no one has any objections, then let's prepare to set off. Our first stop is the Great North-Facing Forest's Northern Transportation Formation." Holy Sun Mi Yen took out a large air transportation spiritual tool and summoned everyone onto it. This air transportation spiritual tool's appearance was a bit like a scabbard and could accommodate about 40 people. There were 32 students in the academy, plus the Holy Sun Mi Yen and a few priests. There were 39 people in total. Therefore, it was quite crowded inside. Sir Jojo expressionlessly sat in the innermost corner with her hands on her knees. She sat obediently next to her husband in a very upright sitting posture. When the air transportation spiritual tool started, it jolted slightly. Zhong Lijiwei's gaze swept over and saw His Highness the Crown Prince instantly reach out to support the little Crown Princess' soft waist. It was so sore that a mouthful of sour water was stuck in her chest, unable to move up or down. Damn it! Did this couple have to be so lovey-dovey? The little Crown Princess was sitting upright. Could it be that she would fall from the air transportation spiritual tool's jolt? The Crown Prince's attention was always on that woman. She was so angry that her chest hurt. Arbor felt a strong gaze directed at her. She raised her head in displeasure and looked at Zhong Lijiwei with a frosty gaze. The corners of the little fellow's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Zhong Lijiwei felt a chill in her face, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Chen Baojia, who was sitting next to Zhong Lijiwei, hurriedly gave Arbor a very stiff smile and then pulled Zhong Lijiwei's sleeve. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool sat there with different thoughts in their minds. Some of them secretly looked at Arbor and Emol Yen, while others looked at each other and whispered to each other. In any case, the students had successfully set off on their journey. Before they left, Principal Yun looked at them kindly and reminded them kindly, "Everyone must remember that you only have one life. Treasures were indeed good, but life was even more precious. Don't put yourself in danger because of some worldly possessions." Sir Jojo sat for about 5 minutes, then took out an orange from his inner world and pulled his husband's sleeve. Emol Lien couldn't help but smile. She reached out to take the orange and peeled it with a smile. The little guy was, in fact, a foodie. Chapter 2989. Even though she had never admitted this point. But reality proved that as long as the little fellow was idle and had nothing to do, she would always be holding snacks or fruits in her hands. What did she like to eat when reading books? What did she like to eat when watching competitions? Even when she was training, she never forgot to eat after coming out of closed-door cultivation. The first thing she did was expressionlessly look for food. Emol Lien snickered inwardly. After perfectly peeling an orange, she handed it to Sir Jojo. Sir Jojo accepted it expressionlessly. Qi Xianxian, who was sitting on the other side of her, silently twitched her mouth. Jojo, this little foodie, was seriously a bit adorable with her stoic expression. Sir Jojo glanced at Qi Xuanxuan's odd expression from the corner of his eye and took out another orange from his inner world and handed it to her. The two of them started eating in the last row. After finishing the orange, they switched to a banana. After finishing the banana, they took out some dried fruit and started nibbling on it. Then they took turns eating pastries and candies. In the end, they even started munching on melon seeds. Duan Yu, Duan Muqing, and the others, who were sitting in front of them, all twitched their mouths as they secretly suppressed their laughter. These two girls, they were completely treating this as an outing. Holy Sun Mi Yen finally couldn't take it anymore and said, "Set the table." Those two words were sonorous and forceful, almost causing people to choke with laughter. Although Lord Holy Sun's cultivation had reached the spiritual venerable realm, he was used to eating 2 meals a day. So in essence, Lord Holy Sun was also a bit of a foodie. If he wasn't in closed-door cultivation, he would eat every day. Because it was a bit crowded with 39 people, it was completely impossible to set up a small table from the side. Hence, The white-robed priests sat around Lord Holy Sun, each of them holding a bowl of food and handing a bowl of rice to Lord Holy Sun. They silently watched Lord Holy Sun eat gracefully and unhurriedly like this. Sir Jojo glanced at him and silently took back the pile of snacks. He took out his all-purpose food box from his inner world and took out a large pot of fresh fish soup. He also took out 3 to 4 plates of stir-fry and had Duan Yu, the little fatty, and Duan Mu Qing turn around to carry them for him. Jojo Sama started eating expressionlessly. Qi Xuanxuan's mouth twitched. She stuffed a mouthful of rice into her mouth and almost burst out laughing. The little fatty hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and cried out, Don't spit, we still have to continue eating later." Mo Lien was so amused by the little guy that she was about to cramp up. This little stoic had always been expressionless, but inexplicably, her entire body was brimming with comedic talent, making people want to smile knowingly. Holy Sun Mi Yen chewed the food in his mouth without tasting it. He only felt that his nose was filled with the aroma of the fish soup and all kinds of stir-fried food. He lowered his head and looked at the rice, steamed buns, and a plate of cold frozen duck meat in his bowl. That plate of frozen duck meat was old and dry. He instinctively wanted to throw it away. Gotcha! Holy Sun Mayan was so angry that he broke the chopsticks in his hand. Seated behind the saint, eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but rub his forehead. Why the hell did he have the urge to burst out laughing? How many spirit coins? Holy Sun Mi Yen suddenly spoke. He just couldn't understand. They both came out for training, so how could that neurotic little stoic still take out warm food? Chapter 2990. Just how freaking much of a foodie are you to be able to store so much food in your inner world? The little priest next to Sir Holy Sun cautiously reminded, "Sir, that stoic face often sells at exorbitant prices. Our family really doesn't need to spend so many spirit coins to buy that stoic face's sky-high price dishes." The 2 young masters of the Dou family couldn't help but stifle their laughter. In reality, the 2 of them had wanted to laugh since the beginning, but because they had to take Holy Sun Mi Yan's face into consideration, they endured with great difficulty. At this time, Sir Jojo had already eaten his fill. He took that pot of fish soup from Duan Yu and held it himself. Then, he handed him a clean pair of chopsticks and a bowl of rice, indicating for him to eat. Hearing Sir Holy Sun's inquiry, the little stoic expressionlessly said, "1 pot is 200,000 spirit coins. A small bowl is 20,000 spirit coins." Cough, 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 cough. Before Qi Xianxian could spit out the rice in her mouth, she was hastily stopped by the quick-witted little fatty. "Don't spit on Ancestor Xianxian, don't spit." They still had to continue eating, big sister. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was dark and gloomy. He stifled for a long time before saying, "Your price is even more expensive than the sky-high holy rice sold at Dragonflame City's Kaidai veranda." Arbor aloofly looked up at him like he was looking at a pauper. "You can't afford it, so what are you asking for?" It was simply a waste of her saliva. Everyone, the little priest couldn't resist secretly reminding Sir Holy Sun, "Sir, actually, we don't have to talk to the little stoic." Was there something wrong with this Holy Sun? Why did he have to tease and talk to the stoic face? Every time, he would be angered to the point of vomiting blood. Wasn't he sick? The Holy Sun coldly ordered after slapping that priest's head, "Shut up. Give me a small bowl." The Holy Sun said furiously. Everyone couldn't resist wanting to laugh. The little stoic expressionlessly filled a bowl of fresh fish soup for Sir Holy Sun and had Lu Yu pass it over. The Holy Sun took a sip and immediately sensed the difference. This fish soup felt like it was freshly cooked in a restaurant. He could taste its fresh aroma, and his tongue felt like it was about to melt. Compared to his lukewarm rice, this bowl of fresh fish soup was a little hot. After the saint finished his bowl of fish soup, he turned his face away and stopped talking. Over at Duan Yu's place, they took turns eating lunch in threes before finally stopping. Arbor put away the bowls and chopsticks and let the diligent Qiuqiu wash them. The saint suddenly asked with a cold face, "Do you have steamed buns for sale?" It turned out that the saint had not eaten his fill. The saint added, "The kind that's piping hot. 500 spirit coins for 1 bun. You should become a robber, "It suits you better." Everyone ridiculed inwardly. Subsequently, they heard eldest young Master Qin say, "Give me 2." When he turned around and saw Qin Jiao looking at him with a pitiful expression, eldest young Sir Qin choked and hastily said, "Give me 4." 6. Omega Kotoku said calmly. Eldest young Sir Qin silently took out his money pouch and took out 3,000 spirit coins to give to the little stoic in exchange for 6 piping hot meat buns. The stoic face expressionlessly put away the money and took out a pot of spiritual tea from her inner world, pouring a cup for Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others. Sir Holy Sun, who was currently chewing on a meat bun, couldn't resist the urge to spit at her. "I bought your steamed buns, so you should also give me a cup of tea." Chapter 2991. Eldest young Sir Qin twitched his mouth. According to his understanding of the little stoic, this Sir Holy Sun was clearly looking for trouble again. 1 cup of spiritual tea is 10,000 spirit coins. 3 cups. Eldest young Sir Qin decisively paid again, attracting the gazes of the Gu family's Gu Yishuan and the others like they were looking at an idiot. For people in their cultivation realms, what could they do if they didn't eat or drink for several days and nights? Did they have to buy the exorbitant price of the stoic face's tea and rice here? The eldest young Sir blinked and said with a grin, "I just love to see the little stoic's mischievous appearance when she scams people." Everyone, based on his understanding of the little stoic, although she didn't have much of an expression right now, she should still be quite happy on the inside. She was happy. It was worth it to spend some money to make the stoic face happy. Young Sir Omega Kotoku silently accepted a cup of spiritual tea. After taking a sip, he was slightly startled. Sir Holy Sun angrily flung 20,000 spirit coins at the little stoic. 2 cups. His liver was on fire, and 1 cup was simply not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Gu Yishuan looked at these people as if they were lunatics. Sir Holy Sun definitely had a serious problem. Say, he didn't get along with the little stoic, but he just had to stick close to her and look for trouble. Say, they had similar temperaments, but every time he was angered by this stoic face, the veins on his forehead would bulge. They didn't look like friends at all. 10 cups. At this time, another person spoke up. Everyone turned to look and saw that the one who spoke was Ming Province's Crown Prince, Ming Yasi. Akir twisted the handkerchief in her hand with a slightly distorted expression. She looked like she couldn't sit still and kept glaring at Jojo. In reality, most of the people who originally forked out money to buy the spiritual tea did so in order to make the little stoic happy. Unexpectedly, they immediately felt something was wrong after taking a sip. This really wasn't some ordinary tea. It really was spiritual tea. After Sir Holy Sun finished drinking a cup, he actually muttered to himself, "There's a reason why it's expensive." This spiritual tea was simply worlds apart from the ones he had eaten in the past. Sir Holy Sun couldn't resist looking back at the little stoic. At this time, the little girl was completely silent. She leaned against the last row and flipped through the yellowed ancient book in her hand, reading page by page. Qi Xianxian was currently wiping her purple light treasured sword and caressing it lovingly. 2 days ago, Prince Mo returned the newly forged weapons to Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing, and the others. Everyone's hearts were filled with amazement. In such a short period of time, the Crown Prince was able to refine all 7 weapons to such perfection. Duanmu Qing's Emerald Misty Sword was actually refined into a level 15 divine weapon by Prince Mo. It was simply breathtaking. As for the weapons in Qi Xuanxuan's and the others' hands, they had all been refined to the next level. This time, they were all grade 10 god artifacts and above. Mu Roxuan's face darkened as she sat silently in the corner. Ever since she returned to the academy 2 days ago, she had maintained this state of silence. She didn't want to talk to anyone, and she didn't have the slightest interest in talking to anyone. At this time, looking at Ming Yasi, who was sitting 2 seats in front of her, her gaze flickered unexpectedly, and her heart was filled with displeasure. When she recalled her mother Mu Qingya's reminder, she felt a burst of irritation for no reason. She didn't have any feelings for Ming Yasi at all. She wouldn't leave her future fate in the hands of a strange man like this. While the little stoic was busy eating, Mu Rochuan merely watched coldly from the sidelines. Chapter 2992. Now that she had calmed down, he couldn't resist glancing at her. For some reason, he didn't feel anything when he saw this stoic face in the past, but recently, the more he looked at her, the more vexed he felt. He felt that this girl was very pretentious no matter what she did, as if she was a source of light. Just sitting there and quietly reading a book always attracted people's attention. Bam! All of a sudden, a huge force slammed into their flying spirit tools, causing them to jolt slightly and dive forward. The little stoic, who was holding the book in her hand, was caught off guard and almost rolled out. Emolian was quick to react and quickly reached out to grab his wife, pulling her back to sit next to him. Meanwhile, Duan Yu, who was sitting in front of the little stoic, had already turned around and reached out to support her. The little stoic sat upright and still with a taut face, pulling back Qi Xianxian, who almost rushed out, with her small face taut. Qi Xianxian cursed under her breath and raised her hand to rub her chest. On the other side, Zhongli Jiwei and Chen Baojia weren't so wonderful. They were knocked a few steps forward by this sudden force and crashed into the people sitting in the front row. Zhongli Jiwei was fine, but when she crashed into Dark Yasi, she was forcefully pushed back by the shrieking Akir and glared at several times. Chen Baojia was even more unlucky. She flew into the stocky Ba Shu's back and was pulled into his embrace by the laughing boorish man. Ba Shu's bearded face magnified infinitely in front of her eyes. Chen Baojia even felt that man's large palm pinching the soft parts of her body. Chen Baojia shrieked and raised her hand to slap Ba Shu's face without thinking. A level 9 spiritual cultivator like Chen Baojia's slap was no different from scratching an itch to the level 12 great spiritual cultivator Ba Shu. Ba Shu grabbed her hand and used his arm to clamp her slender waist. He teased, "Little sister Baojia, you were the one who threw yourself at me. Why are you hitting me?" At this moment, something was ramming into their air transportation spiritual tool with great force. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool was caught off guard and knocked around. Who would have the time to care about Ba Shu and Chen Baojia? Taking advantage of the turbulence of the flying spirit artifact, Ba Shu deliberately pushed Chen Baojia to the left corner and pressed his body against Chen Baojia's chest. With a teasing smile on his face, he purposely rubbed his body against Chen Baojia's soft body. Ba Shu's beady eyes were filled with lust as they rubbed against each other fiercely. "Ah!" Chen Baojia's voice trembled as she screamed. Her long hair was disheveled as she looked towards Prince Emo. Her eyes were filled with hope and a plea for help. Who on the crown prince's side would care about her? The few of them were so shaken that they could barely sit still. Duanmu Qing summoned the emerald misty sword and pierced through the flying spirit tool that had opened a small gap. With a chi-la sound, the ear-piercing cry of a large bird came from outside. Holy Sun Mi Yan's face completely darkened. He leaned against the window and took a look. A flock of birds. They're all level 4 or level 5 spirit beasts. Don't be nervous. Stabilize the flying spirit tool first. Don't panic, Holy Sun Mi Yan said. Chapter 2993. His words were directed at the little priestess, who was controlling the flying spiritual tool. The little priestess's face was a little pale. She pushed the control panel back and forth, trying to stabilize the flying spiritual tool so that it could continue flying. However, there were countless birds blocking the path ahead of the air transportation spirit artifact. Looking out of the control panel's window, he could only see birds crashing into their air transportation spirit artifact non-stop. He couldn't see the road ahead at all. Prince Emo reached out and carried Lord Jojo onto his lap. Lord Jojo sat there obediently. His black eyes rolled around, and he silently took out a small porcelain bottle from his sleeve. Emolian immediately reached out and took it. She waved her hand and opened the left window a little, and the porcelain bottle between her fingers bounced out. The porcelain bottle instantly shattered, and the powder inside floated out. After killing several birds that had rushed in, the window was closed again. The flock of birds outside seemed to have gone crazy. After bumping into the flying spiritual tool a few more times, they suddenly began to kill each other. Outside, dark feathers flew chaotically for a while. Soon, the flock of birds' numbers plummeted because of the infighting. The little priestess, who was controlling the flying spiritual tool, finally saw a little of the road. Her fingers pressed on the control panel a few times, and she hurriedly drove the flying spiritual tool out of the flock of birds in front of them. The air transportation spiritual tool jolted heavily, and Chen Baojia's scream was blocked by a big mouth with a strong smell. Her breath was stuck in her throat, and she could only let out a few muffled screams. Her eyes were filled with horror as she looked at the bearded man who was wantonly touching her body. Chen Baojia was anxious, angry, and hateful. She was angry because no one helped her. She was anxious because her chest felt cold, and the cloth on her body seemed to be getting thinner and thinner. She hated that her cultivation was too low. Her body was tightly bound by the rough man in front of her, and she couldn't break free for a while. In the chaos, she was pressed into a corner by a rude man who was molesting her in front of everyone. Chen Baojia's tears kept rolling in her eyes. She turned her face left and right, trying to avoid the man's mouth. Ba Shu, on the other hand, was aroused by her. He couldn't stop caressing her body. It wasn't until the flock of birds had retreated and the flying spirit artifact had stabilized that Ba Shu finally let go of Chen Baojia's body with a wicked smile. Then he said to her in a low, rough voice, "Next time, don't throw yourself at a man so casually. Not everyone is as polite as I am." Chen Baojia was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She got up and raised her hand to throw it at Ba Shu's face. However, she didn't expect that the air transportation spiritual tool would shake violently again, causing her to stumble and fall into Ba Shu's arms. Ba Shu teased her as he reached out and grabbed her waist, rubbing a certain part of his body against hers. Chen Baojia's tearful little face suddenly stiffened, and her body couldn't help but tremble with anger. Shameless, shameless bastard. She was a pure and unmarried girl, yet she was being teased like this. Now, no one had the time to care about those two people. Holy Sun Mi Yen said with a calm face, "Everyone, pay attention. The air transportation spiritual tool is about to fall. Open the spirit artifact cabin and let everyone down." It seemed that the flock of birds had damaged the air transportation spiritual tool, so everyone had no choice but to fly off the air transportation spiritual tool first. Fortunately, the flock of birds had already been dispersed. Prince Mo hugged Sir Jojo, and the two of them were the first to leave the damaged air transportation spiritual tool. Soon after, Duan Yu, Duan Muqing, and the rest also jumped down. The sixth watch ended. Chapter 2994. Because Chen Baojia was flustered, she stepped on nothing for a moment, and her body swayed and fell down. Ba Shu hurriedly took a few steps forward and pulled Miss Chen into his embrace with his big hands. A gust of wind blew against her face. Embarrassed and angry, Chen Baojia pushed Ba Shu away with all her strength. Unfortunately, her cultivation had been suppressed by Ba Shu. In front of a 12th rank spirit master, she couldn't do anything at all. Therefore, Miss Chen was hugged by Ba Shu and flew down from the air transportation's spiritual tool. The gust of wind in her ears blocked Chen Baojia's curses back into her throat. Zhongli Jiwei was secretly pleased with herself. In fact, she had long noticed that Chen Baojia was being humiliated by Ba Shu. She was just watching from the sidelines. Chen Baojia usually put on a holy and kind face, as if she could talk to anyone and get along well with any young lady in Dragon Flame City. But in fact, she was very good at pretending. Seeing her suffer a few hidden losses today and being molested by Ba Shu's beard, Zhongli Jiwei's heart was filled with a twisted pleasure. She deserved it. She let this woman fight with her for the crown prince position. She thought she was so great just because she was the prime minister's daughter. Let's see if she still has the face to fight with me for that position in the future. Zhongli Jiwei was secretly pleased. It was as if she could get rid of Chen Baojia and keep the crown prince in her pocket. If Lord Jojo knew, he would spit on her face. She didn't know where her confidence came from. In fact, the crown prince couldn't even remember whether she was round or flat. Zhongli Jiwei, on the other hand, wanted to enter the Eastern Palace and become the most honorable woman in the Divine Continent. Everyone flew down from the sky. Everyone's cultivation was above the spiritual realm. Naturally, they wouldn't encounter any danger after flying for a while. Below them was the north-facing forest. But because of the air transportation spiritual tool, they had to land in advance. Therefore, they didn't land near the transportation array in the north. When Sir Jojo landed on the ground, he stepped on the little tail of one of the spirit beasts. The little beast was so shocked that it screamed and tried to run away. Unfortunately, its tail was stepped on by Jojo, and it almost lost its tail when it jumped. Then, it immediately rolled on the ground and screamed twice. The moment Qi Xianxian landed, she coincidentally saw Jojo's dumbfounded expression. She couldn't help but laugh. Lady Qiao Qiao expressionlessly raised her little foot and looked at the little spirit beast that was rolling on the ground and throwing a tantrum. What was going on? She definitely didn't mean to step on it. When the little spirit beast realized that its tail had been freed, it hurriedly got up and rolled towards the underbrush. After a short while, it poked its small head out of the underbrush and threw a certain shiny object to Qiao Mu's feet with a wave of its small paw. Then, it squeaked at her again, raised its little tail, turned nimbly into the bushes, and quickly ran away. Mo Lien was speechless. Why did he have the feeling that his little wife was flirting everywhere she stepped on the little beast's tail, and the little beast actually gave her a gift before it left? This was too much. Qiao Mu expressionlessly stretched out her hand and sucked, and that shiny object landed in her palm. It's actually the crystal core of a 10th grade fire spiritual beast. Mo Lien was speechless. Chapter 2995. The little fellow casually picked up a level 10 fire spirit beast's crystal core. This luck simply made everyone's eyes red with envy. What kind of fucking dog's hit luck was this? She casually landed and stepped on a small beast's tail, yet she still received a spirit beast's crystal core as a gift. Did she have to be so outlandish? The Gu family's Gu Yishuan took a deep look at Arbor. He reached out to pick up a waist pouch that had fallen to the ground and stuffed it back into his waist. Wearing a pair of black boots, he strode forward a few steps. Meanwhile, Zhongli Jiwei's deliberately faked cry of surprise came from the other side. Ayabeo, Baojia, how did you do this? Zhongli Jiwei pursed her lips and did her best to suppress the smile on her lips. She deliberately raised her voice and cried out in surprise, attracting everyone's attention. They saw Chen Baojia hiding behind a pine tree with an ashen complexion. She was practically naked. At this moment, she was taking out clothes from her inner world to cover her chest in a panic. She repeatedly screamed, Don't look over, don't look." Everyone was flabbergasted. "You're a level 9 spiritual cultivator. Don't you know how to use your spiritual energy to protect your body and block out the gales when you land from the air transportation spirit tool? How did you end up in such a sorry state with no clothes covering your body? This was too hilarious." Ba Shu smiled vulgarly and took out a black cloak. He walked to Chen Baojia's side with a hypocritical expression and draped it over her. Miss Chen put it on first. Under everyone's gaze, Ba Shu draped the cloak over her shoulders and conveniently pulled her naked body into his embrace. Chen Baojia felt a wave of revulsion in her heart. She was anxious, angry, and embarrassed. She repeatedly pushed Ba Shu's body and shouted angrily, "Let go, let go." If it weren't for this vulgar man taking advantage of the situation to strip her clothes, would she have ended up in such a sorry state? Now, he was still fine and even dared to pretend to be a good person in front of everyone. Chen Baojia wished for nothing more than to slap him. However, this guy had been secretly and vulgarly using his spiritual pressure to lock down her cultivation, making her unable to resist at all. Everyone looked at this unbearably unlucky Miss Chen and couldn't resist turning back to glance at the expressionless little stoic. Everyone cursed in their hearts. This is probably the true portrayal of luck and misfortune. Some people could just casually land on the ground and step on dog shit luck. However, some people were just so unlucky. Even after jumping off an air transportation spiritual tool, they would still end up in a sorry state. Arbor naturally didn't know what everyone was thinking. She silently put away the crystal core that the little beast gave her and walked forward. The group followed behind her noisily for a while. They felt that the road was overgrown with dead branches and broken trees everywhere. It seemed to be quite difficult to walk. Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and she reflexively glanced at Duan Yu beside her. Our dear Duan Yu was immediately tempted. He coughed lightly and said seriously, "Jojo, how about we have Holy Sun Mayan lead the way?" The little fellow paused and looked at them in confusion. "I'm not leading the way." Everyone was at a loss for words. Holy Sun Mayan also reacted at this time and grumpily rebuked Sir Jojo, "You don't know the way and always like to be the first to rush. Why are you leading everyone blindly?" Sir Jojo expressionlessly said, "I didn't ask you to follow. You like to walk blindly, yet you're blaming me, Humph." Chapter 2996. Move to the back. Holy Sun Mi Yen angrily swung his sleeves and walked to the front, leading the group towards the transportation array in the north. Since the place where they landed wasn't far from the transportation array, it would only take them less than an hour to walk there. To these spirit realm cultivators, such a small distance was nothing at all. When Holy Sun Mi Yen led the group to the transportation array in the north of the north-facing Great Forest, they saw from afar that many people were already standing near the transportation array. It seemed that the Divine Palace had really spent a lot of money to invite many students from the academy to participate in the training in the secret realm. "Get out of the way, quick, get out of the way, get out of the way." A tiger's roar came from the back of the group, making them jump in fright. Everyone subconsciously scattered in all directions to avoid the roar. Holy Sun Mi Yen narrowed his eyes and immediately saw a white tiger chasing after a young man who was small in stature but abnormally fast. The tiger was running towards them. This young man's legs were so fast that he arrived in front of them in a few turns. Without saying a word, he hid behind Holy Sun Mi Yen and exclaimed, "Oh my God, big brother, save your brother." The white-robed young priest next to Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but shout, "Who's your big brother? Don't randomly claim to be relatives." "Hey little barbarian, why are you running? Didn't we agree to only fight and not run? Why are you scared now?" A slightly familiar delicate reprimand subsequently entered Xiao Mu's ears, causing her to subconsciously blink her eyes. A cyan shadow flew out from behind the tree. Her long hair was braided and thrown behind her head, and a pair of exceptionally bright eyes looked around with vigor. When her line of sight fell on Arbor, the girl's eyes lit up with a whoosh, and then she screamed. "Little junior sister." This little junior sister could be said to be earth-shattering. The moment he called her little junior sister, a group of people came out from behind the trees and rushed over. Some of these people were holding spatulas in their hands, while others were holding half a drumstick. At a glance, they looked like a group of people having a picnic. The guy holding the drumstick immediately threw away the greasy drumstick in his hand. He excitedly wiped his hands on his body and dashed toward Arbor. "Oh my God, it really is our little stoic face. Ah, a stoic face, it's truly a small world. I didn't expect that the junior sister that I've been thinking about for so long would suddenly appear in front of me." Arbor looked at them expressionlessly. He was a little confused and felt that his eyes weren't enough. A large group of people ran over. The long-braided girl running at the front was senior sister Liang Qingqing. The idiot with greasy hands behind him was Wei Nanfeng. Afterward, senior brother Situ, who was full of smiles and resembled a willow in the breeze, quickly walked over. There was also classmate Bailey Shi, who was similarly stoic and expressionless. Yushio, Lightning, Haitang, Dark Flower, Dark Current, and Charming Night, not a single one was missing. Everyone was here. Just as Wei Nanfeng had said before, it was truly a small world. She didn't expect that the friends she hadn't seen in a long time would suddenly reunite here. Doya walked up very excitedly and reached out to hug the little fellow. "Little junior sister, are you all right?" She had truly missed her too much during this period of time. Unfortunately, Icebound City was isolated from the rest of the world, so she never had the chance to come out. Chapter 2997. The little stoic suddenly smiled, her eyes sparkling as she looked at this group of people in front of her. Doya felt as if there were a myriad of flowers before her eyes, and even frost flowers were blooming along with her. She was incredibly delighted. Oh my, her little stoic junior sister was actually smiling so cutely at her. Her heart was about to melt. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess, it's truly great to see you. Ao Yi and his group couldn't help but want to cry. Their recent experiences were simply indescribable, and they felt bitter just thinking about it. Originally, Man wanted to follow the Crown Princess to the 6 prefectures, but an accident happened once they arrived at Shuntian Prefecture. Afterwards, they were forcefully bought and abducted back to Fire Smelting City and Icebound City, so they couldn't train with the Crown Princess for a long time. The days of being cut off from the rest of the world were too unbearable. Yu Xiu and his group silently shed tears. Arbor looked at their bitter faces and couldn't help but want to laugh. His small lips curled up as he cracked a smile. Are you also here to participate in the Sun Moon's Secret Realms training? Only then did everyone realize that the little stoic and the others must have come here for the same purpose as them. Liang Qingqing was instantly overjoyed. Oh my little junior sister, this is truly great. We haven't had fun together for a long time. This time we must go together. Wei Nanfeng couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Do you know how to speak? What fun. It's clearly training. The little fellow nodded happily. What treasure do you want? I'll find it for you. She spoke as if the entire secret realm was already in her pocket. Holy Sun Mi Yen fumed and glared at the little stoic, irritably glaring at her. Then, his face filled with suspicion as his gaze swept over Qi Xianxian, Liang Qingqing and the others. Originally, this stoic face already had a dozen or so allies. If the dozen or so freaking people from Fire Smelting City and Icebound City were added, wouldn't the stoic face's allies reach nearly 30 people? Was this appropriate after entering the secret realm? There were only about 40 people from the Temple of Light that had entered the secret realm. The stoic face's allies could already catch up to their employer, the temple. Holy Sun Mi Yan's handsome face was gloomy as he carefully examined the little stoic and her allies. The more he looked at it, the more his head hurt. The strength of this allied legion did not seem weak. Do you guys like elixirs or spirit artifacts? If only I could find a few divine artifacts. When the little stoic saw that her family's allies had arrived, she also added a few more sentences. But as these words fell into Saint Sun Mi Yan's ears, the more he heard, the more he felt something was wrong. This stoic face was really not reserved at all. It was as if the Sun-Moon mystery realm was opened by her family. She acted like she was rich and overbearing. It was as if she could just wave her small hand and let her allies take whatever they wanted. Holy Sun Mi Yen sneered sinisterly. At this time, Crown Prince Imo had also walked up. He nodded at City E and the others and said, "Let's find a quiet place to talk." Crown Prince Lien is right. Wei Nanfeng nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, "Let's not stand here and block the way. Let's go back and continue the barbecue. We can chat while we eat." The group didn't wait for Holy Sun Mi Yen to speak and went around behind the tree in a hubbub. They had originally set up a small camp at the back and were barbecuing when they heard Liang Qingqing's exclamation of "little junior sister," so they all ran over. Now that everyone had returned to that small camp, they all laughed out of anger with a single glance. Broken dreams. Make up for it tomorrow. Chapter 2998. You guys. Liang Qingqing couldn't help but stare blankly at the group of people sitting in front of the grill. They had previously washed and peeled the food and placed it on the grill. Just because they went to see little junior sister, they all ran away. However, they did not expect that when they returned to their original position, there would actually be someone occupying their place and openly enjoying their food. He had never seen or heard of such a thing before. Wei Nanfeng chuckled and said sarcastically, "I've seen shameless people before, but I've never seen such shameless people. I say, brothers, this food doesn't seem to be yours? You can actually eat it with such a clear conscience?" There were currently 7 to 8 people sitting in front of the grill. To be specific, they were 7 brawny men and a graceful woman with a red veil over her face. Those 7 brawny men were currently eating the food on the grill without even lifting their heads. However, that woman in red stood up, and her gaze suddenly brightened when it landed on Wei Nanfeng. Yo, this little brother, don't be so angry. Our dear Wei Nanfeng practically ducked behind the little stoic out of reflex looking at the people around him. He really wasn't the only one who reflexively moved like him. The most hilarious was still the little stoic. She also reflexively extended her small hand to block the woman in red and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" Mo Lien twitched her mouth and lamented in her heart, "Where did this bunch of scoundrels get this bad habit?" They reflexively ducked behind his wife when they encountered a woman who was stirring up trouble. It simply made one's heart stifled. The woman in red was startled, and she sized up the little stoic before saying with a chuckle, "Little sister, you aren't looking for a beating, right? Hurry and move aside, don't obstruct me from chatting with these little brothers." As she spoke, she turned her gaze and saw the Qin family's young masters walking over with Ming Yasi and the others. This woman's eyes clearly brightened, and she walked towards eldest young master Qin with a turn of her feet. The eldest young master immediately dashed to Arbor's side. "Stoic face, save me." "Bah, who wants your life?" The woman in red ridiculed in her heart, and her gaze swept over them. "Oh, you're all together? Who are you?" Arbor sized her up. At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen heard the news and came forward, introducing them to both sides. "They are students of the royal school." Holy Sun Mi Yen turned to Arbor and said, "This is Queen Fu Sha of the Dafeng tribe." The little stoic replied indifferently before glancing at the 7 brawny men who stood up and walked behind Queen Rosa. The 7 of them had the same arrogant expression. Liang Qingqing could not help but frown and said, "Your men ate our food. Compensate me." Queen Fu Sha raised her delicate eyebrows slightly and laughed. "This little sister is right. Since we ate your food, we naturally have to pay for it." As he spoke, he took out a purse from his waist, counted out 1,000 spirit coins, and handed them over with both hands. Liang Qingqing only glanced at her with a faint smile, but didn't reach out to take it. Since Queen Fu Sha is the leader of a tribe, she must have seen the world. The food we put on the grill is worth at least 8,000 spirit coins, if not 10,000. Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Queen Fu Sha was startled, but then she laughed. "Oh, as it turns out, you encountered a group of people who are selling at a cheap price. Don't think that this queen is afraid of you just because you have more people." Liang Qingqing raised her eyebrows. "What, as the leader of a tribe, are you trying to snatch other people's food and refuse to acknowledge your debt? Little sister, don't say such unpleasant words." Fu Sha giggled and covered her mouth with her hand. "When we just arrived, there wasn't a single person in front of the grill. How can you prove that the food was left behind by you guys?" Liang Qingqing exploded in anger. However, after thinking it over, there really was nothing to prove that they left behind all the meat and poultry on the grill. Qi Xianxian tugged on the little stoic's sleeve and asked quietly, "Jojo, are these the friends who waited at the city gate when you first arrived at Shantian Prefecture?" Sir Jojo nodded. Qi Xianxian beamed with joy. Then today is truly an unexpected reunion. At this moment, Liang Qingqing and the others were also curiously sizing up Qi Xianxian and the others. Now wasn't a good time to introduce each other's identities or speak. She was busy negotiating with that whatever queen, so when she heard this, she only smiled at Qi Xianxian and nodded in greeting. Since there's no way to prove it, then who said there's no way to prove it? Arbor said aloofly. Fu Sha's lips turned up slightly. "How do you want to prove it?" Just as she finished asking this, the sound of people falling to the ground came from behind her. When Queen Fu Sha turned around to look, she was a bit stupefied. What was going on? The 7 strong men who were fine just now were all on the ground now. Their heads were tilted, their limbs were twitching, and white foam was even coming out of their mouths. This clearly looked like they had been poisoned. Queen Fu Sha turned around with a swish and glared at Arbor. She shouted harshly, "You poisoned them?" Xiao Mu calmly nodded her small head. "In order to prevent others from secretly eating it, we've smeared poison on our food beforehand." Mo Lien and Duan Yu couldn't help twitching their mouths. Everyone else was instantly speechless. "What kind of freaking taste do you have?" How could you be so ruthless to yourself just to prevent others from secretly eating Queen Fu Sha's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets? Little miss, do you need to go to this extent? The little girl nodded in all seriousness. One antidote pill costs 100,000 spirit coins. 7 pills are a fixed price, so I'll give you a discount of 680,000 spirit coins, no bargaining. Everyone, haha. Liang Qingqing was in a good mood and laughed heartily. My heavens! Their little stoic was seriously too amusing. When she opened her mouth earlier, she only asked for 18,000 spirit coins for food expenses. When it came to the stoic face, the no bargaining price was 680,000 spirit coins. Haha! Looking at Queen Fu Sha's eyes that were spitting fire, everyone could imagine how dark the face under the veil was. Holy Sun Mi Yen was actually in the mood to watch a good show. He also didn't know what was wrong with him. It seemed like he really was in a good mood when he saw the little stoic dissing people. What was going on? It seemed like he was in a strange mood. For example, he was used to being frequently dissed by the stoic face. One day, he suddenly discovered that it was really quite satisfying to sit and watch the situation unfold while smiling as the stoic face dissed others. Holy Sun Mi Yen creased his brows slightly, inexplicably feeling that there might be something wrong with him. Cough cough cough. Mo Lien coughed lightly and said while holding back her laughter, Jojo, antidote pills are hard to make. Isn't it too cheap to sell them for 100,000 spirit coins per pill? Chapter 2999. As soon as the little fellow opened her mouth, Queen Fu Sha threw the entire purse into Arbor's arms with a smack, not giving her any leeway to change her words. There's 680,000 and several thousand inside. Don't bother with the change. Give me the 7 detoxification pills. She finally saw the signs. If she hesitated for half a second, that stoic-faced lady would definitely raise the price. Fu Sha couldn't help but praise herself for being quick-witted. At the same time, she also saw Holy Sun Mi Yen, who was standing to the side, looking at her approvingly with an experienced gaze. Arbor put away the purse and took out the 7 detoxification pills with an expressionless face. These detoxification pills need to be dissolved in water and swallowed. Give me 7 cups of clear water. Queen Fu Sha gathered 7 cups, bowls, and plates of different shapes and sizes and asked a water spirit to fill them with water. Only then did Arbor put the 7 detoxification pills into the 7 containers. He expressionlessly watched Queen Fu Sha busily feed the pills to his subordinates. About 3 minutes later, the 7 brawny men opened their eyes and woke up at the same time. Queen Fu Sha's expression was somewhat joyful. Are you all okay? It was good that they woke up. Her 7 subordinates would be of great use in the future, so they couldn't be killed by poison in such a muddle-headed manner. The 7 brawny men's expressions changed, and they abruptly pushed Queen Fu Sha away and jumped up, running toward a nearby tree as if they were flying. Blurg! One of the brawny men began to vomit while leaning against a tree. The other brawny men also began to puke while gasping for breath. Queen Fu Sha only felt a sour stench waft into her nose, and she felt nauseous. Queen Fu Sha's shoulders shrugged slightly. She turned around and saw her 7 subordinates vomiting dizzily while leaning against a tree. Unexpectedly, she also couldn't help but run to the other side and vomit as well. Arbor was baffled and muttered to himself, she didn't eat a vomiting pill. Everyone present was an almighty with profound cultivation. When they heard this, they all looked at Sir Jojo as if they were looking at a little monster. As it turned out, the reason why those 7 unlucky fellows vomited was because they didn't take any antidote at all, but vomit pills. Queen Fu Sha was also funny. Her subordinate took the vomit pill and ran off to vomit, and she actually followed him and vomited. The 7 burly men vomited for about half an incense stick's worth of time. Their stomachs were filled with acid, and they were seeing stars. In the end, he sat down on the ground and panted heavily. He felt as if there were fragments of stars flying around him. So dizzy the 7 men's stomachs were almost empty, but when they turned their heads and saw their companions' faces, they couldn't help but feel nauseous. They turned their heads and began to retch again. Holy Sun Mi Yen was speechless as he looked at Queen Fu Sha's group of 8. Inexplicably, a trace of sympathy emerged in his heart. Back then, when he was at his most unlucky, he only lived in an empty house without anything. The little stoic wouldn't go so far as to feed him a strange medicine like a vomit pill. But now, looking at the queen and her party's misfortune, it seemed that the little stoic wasn't so unreasonable to him back then. Liang Qingqing suppressed her laughter with difficulty. She cleared her throat and said in deadly earnest, I think it's getting late. The temple's holy sun, shouldn't we set out? Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at Liang Qingqing indifferently. Wait a bit longer. There are still people who haven't arrived. Chapter 3000. Everyone reflexively glanced in Holy Sun Mi Yan's direction. This Sir Holy Sun had been unperturbed since the beginning, as if he was waiting for someone to arrive. Could it be that the temple had sent an even more formidable expert aside from this Holy Sun? While everyone was thinking this, they vaguely heard the elegant sound of wind music drifting into their ears from afar. When they looked up, they saw a sky full of flowers drifting down. 4 to 5 young women in white muslin slowly descended from the sky while surrounding a young lady in white clothes with her skirt fluttering in the wind, as if a celestial maiden descending to the mortal world. Arbor glanced at them and couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Every time that holy daughter appeared, she would always have people scatter flowers to welcome her respectfully. However, there wasn't such a grand display today. There were only 4 to 5 young girls flying around her with their own petals and halos. Compared to the first time they met in the imperial capital, when she was surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people, this was indeed a scene that paled in comparison to the first time. Greetings to Holy Daughter. Everyone from the temple bowed in greeting. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at Nie Yaoguang apathetically and nodded at her. Yaoguang, have the people from the other 3 academies all arrived? Holy Daughter Nie Yaoguang stepped forward and bowed slightly toward Holy Sun Mi Yen. She nodded and said, the people from Flying Sword Academy, Hong Estate, and Blue Ocean Academy have all arrived. Go count the number of people. Holy Sun Mi Yen said indifferently, if everyone is here, then we'll set off. Nie Yaoguang nodded. From beginning to end, she looked straight ahead and didn't shift her gaze even half an inch toward Arbor. She didn't know if it was because she was scared by the little stoic's previous beating or if she really didn't want to pay attention to her, but she completely ignored the stoic face. Since she ignored Arbor, Arbor naturally wouldn't take the initiative to pay attention to her. Seeing that Holy Daughter Nie Yaoguang led people to the side to count the number of people, Miss Qiao stood to the side and waited calmly. Before long, Nie Yaoguang returned to the Holy Sun's side and nodded at that person. Everyone is basically here, except for Madame Gua and a few others who haven't. Sorry, I'm late. A voice suddenly interrupted Nie Yaoguang's words. Immediately after, everyone saw a plump lady with a black veil covering her face, leading a burly man and an old man with a black beard forward. Arbor recognized that sturdy man. He was precisely the one he had encountered in the small courtyard that day when he rescued 5th young Master Qin. The black-bearded old man had a pair of dignified tiger eyes. Arbor had never seen him before. The old man's cultivation seemed to be quite high, but he couldn't tell what realm he was in at a glance. When Madame Goen walked up to the Holy Sun, she finally saw clearly that the little stoic was standing to the side. Madame's face immediately darkened. Without saying a word, she summoned a spiritual weapon from her mind and threw it at the expressionless Sir Jojo. This damned little stoic, she'd used a spirit weapon this time. Let's see how she dodged it. Arbor stretched out his hand and pushed out a circular ripple-shaped pattern, directly using the water spirit to imprison the spirit weapon Madame had thrown inside. The friction between the air currents produced a series of clattering sounds. For a moment, that spirit weapon was immobilized inside the water spirit circle and couldn't break through that circle's barrier no matter how hard it tried. Madame Goen's face immediately darkened to the extreme. She clenched her teeth and activated the spirit weapon in her hand, wishing for nothing more than to slit a large hole in the little stoic's neck on the spot. It would be best if she could be taught a lesson on the spot. Chapter 3001. Bang! Prince Mo slightly narrows his eyes. With a light flick of his sleeve, the spiritual weapon sent over by Madame Gowan is quickly pushed away. Unable to withstand the gravity, that spiritual weapon suddenly flies backwards. With a chi sound, it passes through several trees before finally collapsing high up in the sky. A perfectly good spiritual weapon has actually turned into a piece of scrap metal in an instant, falling to the ground with a dong-dong sound. Madame Gowan is so angry that her eyes turn red. Mo Lien. This guy is simply too infuriating. Does he even put this ant of mine in his eyes? In broad daylight, under the watchful eyes of so many people, he actually acted so recklessly. Most importantly, he completely destroyed the spiritual weapon that she had painstakingly taken out. Madame Gowan looks at the spiritual weapon lying on the ground, which has already lost its radiance. She inwardly grinds her teeth in anger. Mo Lien coldly glances at her. Gowan, this crown prince has given you face. Don't be ungrateful. Madame Gowan's face immediately turns deathly pale from anger. Seeing this, Holy Sun Mi Yen hurriedly steps forward and stops Madame Gowan. Since Madame Gowan has already arrived, then let's set off. Madam? Holy Sun Mi Yen slightly shakes his head at Madame Gowan. His meaning is very obvious. He wants her to quickly calm down, lest she really suffers a big loss. Madame Gowan immediately calms down slowly. Looking at Prince Mo and Arbor in front of her, and then glancing at the unfriendly crowd beside the two of them, Madame Gowan takes a deep breath and slowly lets go of her killing intent. She indifferently says, "Then let's set off." Bang. Suddenly, a ball of divine power bounces in front of Madame Gowan at a speed comparable to light. Madame Gowan didn't notice what happened at first, but when she clearly sees that it's a ball of divine power that has jumped in front of her, her expression suddenly changes greatly. And an old man beside her slightly waves his hands, pushing Madame Gowan behind him. A powerful defensive force erupts from his body, fiercely catching the power of the ball of divine power. When the two collided, the old man's face turned slightly pale. He stood straight in front of Madame Gowan and retreated 3 or 4 steps. Under the protection of the short-bearded old man, Madame Gowan passed through safely, but her face was a little pale from anger, and her chest couldn't help but jump up and down because of this sudden accident. She took a deep breath, her gaze seemingly dipped in poison as she glared at Xiao Mu. The Crown Prince Consort is too audacious. This damned girl actually threw a ball of divine power at her without saying a word. If Mr. Zhao wasn't here today, the National Security Agency would definitely suffer a great loss. The little crown princess looked at her coldly. Suddenly, she waved her hand, and the startled swan dagger, which was hidden in the air, suddenly attacked Madame Guo's neck. No sooner said than done. At that critical moment, the black-bearded old man, Mr. Zhao, pushed Madame Gowan behind him and summoned an extremely powerful water spirit energy with one hand. In an instant, the startled swan dagger that was flying over was sealed in a block of ice by this Mr. Zhao. It couldn't stop trembling and was actually unable to break out of the ice block's encirclement in a short period of time. Mo Lien frowned slightly. She raised her finger and a flame rushed over, directly burning the block of ice that was wrapped around the startled swan dagger. After burning for less than a minute, that block of ice suddenly cracked, and the startled swan dagger jumped out. With an even faster speed, it flew towards Madame Gowan's neck. Chapter 3002. Rip. There was a light sound. Madame Gowan only felt a slight chill on her neck. When she touched it with her hand, she discovered that the little stoic's startled swan dagger had cut a long gash on her neck. The little stoic stood outside the crowd like this and coldly looked at her. She said indifferently, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." For some reason, Madame Gowan's heart suddenly chilled. She only felt that the little girl in front of her was sinister and vengeful, simply not like a normal little girl. No, she couldn't be this impulsive. This little stoic didn't seem to have a high cultivation, but when it came to actual combat, her abilities were much higher than hers. She had to carefully plan before continuing to attack. Otherwise, she would be tricked every time. Just thinking about it made her extremely unwilling. When Madame Gowan thought of this, she took a deep breath and suppressed her emotions with all her might, returning to tranquility. Holy Sun Mi Yen pressed his aching head and hastily stepped forward. He stood between the stoic face and Madame Gowan and said in a low voice, "All right. Don't make a fuss about anything. Now that everyone is here, we'll leave through the transportation portal. Let's go to the nearest three-river pier to board a boat first." Since the Holy Sun said this, the others naturally nodded in agreement and clustered around him as they walked towards the transportation portal. There were several transportation portals in this great north-facing forest. This forest was truly too large, so transportation portals had been set up in all directions. This greatly facilitated the people who came here to experience the world. Holy Sun Mi Yen led everyone directly to the great north-facing forest from this transportation portal, near the three-river pier. The people who walked out of the tactical matrix followed behind Holy Sun Mayan. After looking around for a while, they followed Holy Sun Mayan and walked towards the Sanjiang Wharf. This place wasn't far from the three-river pier, and it was less than a 10-minute walk. From afar, they could see boats coming and going at the pier. The boatmen were busy loading and unloading goods, and it was bustling with activity. Arbor followed not far behind Holy Sun Mi Yen. As he pulled Mo Lien along, he couldn't resist looking around curiously. There were at least 200 to 300 people in their group, so it was impossible to say that they weren't eye-catching. They suddenly walked over from the direction of the teleportation formation, which immediately attracted the attention of many young men on the pier. "The boatman we contacted is just ahead," Holy Sun Mi Yen said indifferently. "Follow me." Holy Sun Mi Yen had already chartered a boat and agreed on the return time with the boatman. Therefore, he easily found the boatman that he had made an appointment with. Not long after everyone boarded the ship, the two-storied ship began to move forward slowly. Holy Sun Mi Yen sent someone to inform everyone, "We will be able to enter Du Chunjiang's range in about a day. After entering the Du Chunjiang, be careful. This is a no-fly zone. If you force your way into the air, you'll have to bear the consequences." Their days were finally stable, and the little stoic finally had time to catch up with Sid Yi and the others. She introduced Qi Xianxian and the others to them. Liang Qingqing said excitedly, "We have been stifled in the fire refining city for a long time. It was not easy for the Sun Moon Temple to select people to enter the secret realm to gain experience, so we volunteered to come. But I didn't expect to meet little junior sister here. Now that I think about it, everything is really guided by fate." Sidui also couldn't resist chuckling. What junior sister Liang says is very reasonable. The next morning, a boatman came and banged on the door vigorously. "Sir Holy Sun is calling for everyone to come out quickly." Chapter 3003. When Arbor and Emolien walked to the deck hand in hand, they saw a sea of heads. Everyone was standing still on the deck. Holy Sun Mi Yen was standing at the front, gazing at the distant riverbank. The ship only needs to stop at 10-Mile Pier to pick up 2 experts. Holy Sun Mi Yen said to everyone, "Up ahead is Dukhun Riverbank. The people of Spring City should be conducting a large-scale sacrificial ceremony. There are a lot of people, so don't disembark if you can." Holy Sun Mi Yen coughed lightly and said, "Those who really can't hold back and want to watch the show, don't go too far after disembarking. After we pick up the people, we'll set off immediately in about 2 hours. Don't leave yourselves behind at that time." After saying that, he deliberately found the little stoic in the crowd and looked her up and down. Thereupon, the priests next to Holy Sun Mi Yen, as well as some students from the Royal Academy, all looked at the little stoic in unison. The stoic face didn't have the slightest expression, but Sir Jojo's heart was galloping. What's going on? Is there something wrong with Holy Sun Mi Yen's eyesight? Why did he deliberately sweep his gaze over and focus on Sir Jojo? It's as if this Sir is stirring up trouble everywhere. This Sir is clearly very easy to talk to. Liang Qingqing and the others couldn't resist covering their mouths and snickering. "Since we're stopping for 2 hours and it looks quite lively up ahead, Jojo, how about we disembark and take a stroll?" Sir Jojo's large eyes were spirited as he looked around. He coughed lightly and said with a reluctant expression, "Since you guys want to disembark and take a look so much, then I'll accompany you guys for a stroll. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. You say it like you're reluctant, but you're actually very excited on the inside. Spring City's large-scale sacrificial ceremony was currently in full swing. Many young men and women crowded around the riverbank with offerings on their heads. It was a noisy and boisterous scene. The elder in charge of the sacrificial ceremony was a cyan-robed elder. He held a long staff and muttered a long string of words. Soon after, he shouted in a clear voice, "Let the sacrificial ceremony begin." The heavy sound of drums was played, accompanied by the roars of 2 rows of bare-chested brawny men, which sounded very rhythmically. Arbor's group landed on the riverbank, but they didn't squeeze into the crowd. Instead, they walked around the stalls along the riverbank. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but whisper, "Are they holding an early spring ceremony?" The little stoic naturally wouldn't care about their sacrificial offerings. Everyone was in a good mood today. Whenever they saw something delicious or fun, they wanted to buy it. This was especially true for Spring City's local specialty, soy sauce pork ribs. Qi Xianxian, this glutton, tasted it and felt that it was very good. Thus, she bought a lot of it and distributed it to everyone. As the group strolled around, they heard the drumming of the sacrificial ceremony becoming more and more urgent. Suddenly, he was interrupted by a heart-wrenching cry. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound. A group of muscular men with bare arms carried trays of sacrificial offerings forward. Although the crowd was crowded, they still maintained order. When the muscular men walked past, everyone moved to the sides, leaving a path in the middle that could accommodate 2 people walking side by side. At this time, Qi Xianxian and the others saw that 3 animals, 5 grains, and all kinds of rare and exotic fruits were arranged on the offering trays like flowing water. The cry came from the crowd. An old woman staggered forward with the sacrificial procession and reached out several times, wanting to grab the offering trays. Unfortunately, she was short and couldn't reach the large trays that the muscular men were carrying over their heads. Chapter 3004. Arbor and the rest saw from afar that there was a young girl tied up on the tray. She was kneeling there with an ashen face and a depressed look in her eyes. The old woman cried along with the group, mournfully calling out the young girl's name. However, even if she screamed until her throat was hoarse, no one would pay attention to her. Seeing this, little Fatty's spirit was shaken. He rubbed his fists and shouted, "I'll go over and find out what happened." His reputation of being a nosy person was not for nothing. In less than 10 minutes, little Fatty squeezed out of the crowd. With a sigh, he said to Arbor, Qi Xianxian and the rest, "Do you know? Today, they are worshipping the immortals in the river. They have prepared so many resources and are planning to throw them all into the Duchun River when the auspicious time arrives." However, in recent years, there has been a bad habit in Spring City. Every other year, they will use living women who are 25 years old and have not yet married as sacrifices. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Liang Qingqing could not help but shiver. She cursed in her heart and said, "What? Are they discriminating against older unmarried girls?" She, Liang Qingqing, was 21 years old this year. According to the rules of Spring City, she would be in danger in 4 years. She might even become a sacrifice for the immortals in the river. Lord Xiao Qiao blinked her eyes and looked at the little fatty curiously. The city is so big, so there must be a lot of unmarried women who have reached the age of 25. Why did you capture that lady as a sacrifice? Little Fatty touched his nose and coughed. It's strange. This Spring City is really weird. They choose their sacrifices based on their beauty. Among the 25-year-old unmarried girls, they choose the prettiest girl. Liang Qingqing suddenly shivered. She secretly compared her appearance to the girl on the tray. She felt that she was more beautiful than the girl on the tray. She suddenly felt lucky that she was not from this weird Spring City. Otherwise, in 4 years, it might be her turn to become a sacrifice in the river. Little Fatty chuckled and glanced at Liang Qingqing. As if guessing what she was thinking, he hurriedly said, "Don't panic, this is only for ordinary people." Thinking about it, a level 5 fire spirit master like Liang Qingqing would not be so easily subdued and become Du Chuanjiang's sacrifice. Even so, Liang Qingqing and the others were still unconvinced. They rubbed their fists and were eager to give it a try. I'll go save that poor girl. Why should a good-looking girl become a sacrificial offering in this river without getting married at the age of 25? The little fatty hurriedly stopped Liang Qingqing. Hey, let's wait and see. The main thing was that he didn't know the situation. If he acted rashly, it might not be of much help to others. However, Liang Qingqing was an impatient person. Didn't you already ask around? There's no time to lose. You guys wait here. I'll go alone. After saying that, Liang Qingqing was about to squeeze out of the crowd and walk towards the sacrificial procession. Arbor immediately grabbed her arm and said with a serious face, "Let me do it." Everyone was speechless. The little girl's expression was eager to try. Naturally, they didn't want to spoil her mood. She wanted to see what kind of god this immortal in the river was. He actually tricked so many people to come and pay their respects. Arbor didn't say anything and quickly walked in front of the sacrificial procession. Chapter 3005. And at this time, the elderly presiding over the sacrifice had already impatiently ordered 2 people to go forward and pull that old woman away. The old woman couldn't resist wailing loudly. "You can't do this. I beg you, let my daughter go." Liang Qingqing still couldn't hold back and followed closely behind the little stoic to the sacrifice team. "Hurry and release her." These people were truly too excessive. She wasn't their daughter, so they didn't feel any heartache even after throwing her into the river. To put it bluntly, these people only dared to lay their hands on commoners. If it was someone with true status, they naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be manipulated as they wished. When the elderly presiding over the sacrifice heard this, he glanced at them coldly. "Someone, disperse all the unrelated people. Continue with the sacrifice." With a light swish, the 2 burly men holding the living tray above their heads felt their shoulders go numb. Their bodies trembled slightly, and they involuntarily fell backward. He was very clear that he had fallen into someone's trap, but he simply couldn't control himself. He could only watch helplessly as he fell backward with a bang, landing headfirst on the ground. The girl on the tray naturally lost her balance and fell down. When Liang Qingqing saw this, she couldn't help but be amused. She quickly rushed forward and supported that girl, allowing her to steady herself. An attack talisman flew up from Arbor and directly pounced at that gloomy elderly man. "Since someone must be the sacrifice, why don't you go?" That elderly man was dumbstruck. Before he could react, he felt his body being forcefully pulled by a force, and he flew uncontrollably toward the riverbank. The elderly man yelled in alarm. The people around him all reached out in a flurry, wanting to grab him, but they simply couldn't resist that pulling force. The sacrifice team instantly fell into chaos. Everyone screamed in disarray and fled toward the back of the crowd. In just an instant, the staff in the cyan robe elder's hand flew out, and he uncontrollably rolled toward the riverbank. After a loud splash, what made everyone dumbfounded was that the old man really rolled into the river. Prince Emo couldn't help but grimace. He raised his hand to cover his face. He didn't see anything. His wife definitely didn't cause any trouble. Duan took a step forward and calmly turned to sweep a glance at Emolien. He couldn't resist frowning strangely. "What's with that expression of yours? Was this guy trying to hypnotize himself that he didn't see anything?" Mu Xingqian's figure flashed, and he used spiritual energy to separate the crowd before hastily rushing to the little stoic and Liang Qingqing's side. "What are you spacing out for? Quick! Big brother Mu can't be thinking that the little stoic will suffer, right?" Duan Yu couldn't resist muttering. According to his understanding of the little fellow, the next one to suffer would definitely be the enemy on the other side. Less than a few seconds after the elderly man fell into the river, the entire Du Chunjiang suddenly flared up. Everyone retreated several steps in terror. Someone shouted, "The immortal in the river has been infuriated," and everyone fled in all directions in a hubbub. At the same time, a huge wave surged out of the river and splashed toward the riverbank with a splash. At first glance, everyone saw the old man being lifted up by the water and tumbling out of the river. Chapter 3006. With a second glance, she was horrified to see a large water snake suffused with an oily green glow burrowing out from behind the elderly man and swallowing him into its stomach in one gulp, not giving him the slightest chance to react. That water snake spat out a bolt of lightning that landed in the water, creating a sizzling electric current that struck towards the riverbank like a bolt of lightning. Qi Xianxian cursed in her mind and reflexively reached out to pull on the little stoic's arm. However, in the blink of an eye, the little stoic had already acted. Several defensive talismans landed in front of them, blocking the lightning that was snaking towards them at lightning speed. At this time, Mu Xingxian had already rushed over and threw out a dozen fireballs without any explanation. They danced in the air as they collided with the water snake that had suddenly burrowed out of the river. After a few sizzling sounds, everyone could clearly see that when the fireball touched the scales of the water snake, the flames disappeared. The little stoic blinked and couldn't help but lament softly, "This large water snake can't be the immortal in the river that Spring City worships, right?" Liang Qingqing nodded. "It's very possible." She grabbed the little stoic's hand and retreated, involuntarily exclaiming, "This water snake nests in this river all year round, so it should be the overlord of this area." Just as she finished speaking, a row of sword-toothed fish leaped out from the riverbank. They leaped half a meter high and pecked through a stone tablet on the riverbank in a few moves. Upon seeing this, Arbor involuntarily creased his brows, thinking that this guy had quite a few helpers. However, it was fortunate that these things could only stay in the water. Once they came ashore, they were like tigers without fangs and were nothing to be afraid of. The sacrificial ceremony had long ended. Everyone wasn't an idiot, and those who could escape had already fled without a trace. The remaining sacrificial procession had also thrown away the sacrificial offerings in their hands and mostly fled. Mu Xingxian circled a defensive talisman with his hand and blocked Sir Jojo, Liang Qingqing, and the others. Mo Lien and Duan Yu also hurried over. However, before the two of them could make a move, they heard a delicate rebuke from afar. Immediately afterwards, a sword light landed in the water, creating a huge splash with a bang. The big water snake roared and swung its tail. With a boom, its tail swept across the surface of the water, rolling up a huge wave. At this moment, Holy Sun Miyan had also stepped on the water surface and hurried over. When he saw the situation on the riverbank, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch as he felt a little uncomfortable. What's going on? Didn't they say they shouldn't cause trouble? Why did it still cause such a huge commotion? He propped up a defensive spiritual barrier with both hands, blocking out the watery light that filled the sky. He had already stepped on the water's surface and swiftly arrived beside the little stoic and the others. Holy Sun Miyan couldn't help but roar, "What are you doing?" At this moment, the giant water snake in the river was clearly enraged by everyone's repeated provocations. "Be careful. This water snake is a level 10 divine beast." The woman who reminded them was the one who had dropped the sword light from the sky. The little stoic glanced at her before shifting her gaze to the woman next to her. She stared intently at the newcomer and racked her brain. Why does she look so familiar? So it's Princess Jing of the Pangu clan from the Aurora Sandfield. Mo Lien nodded indifferently. It was only now that she realized the experts Holy Sun Miyan was waiting for were actually these two people from the Pangu clan. The little stoic, who didn't recognize people, suddenly came to a realization and stared fixedly at the woman next to Princess Jing of the Pangu clan. She is? Chapter 3007. She really looked very familiar, but Arbor couldn't recall where she had seen her before. The little stoic calmly blinked her eyes. She saw that woman's eyes seemed to be poisoned with venom when she glanced at her. The little stoic racked her brains for a long time. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind, and she couldn't resist saying, "Oh, you're that idiot who sent several hundred people to kill me near Mount Daizong in Poland Prefecture, right?" What was her name again? The little stoic already couldn't remember clearly. What was going on? Wasn't this woman already dead? Because she had personally executed this person, her impression of her was rather deep. She was very clear that she wouldn't show mercy. Back then, at the entrance of Wanlu Town's Shunlai Inn, she had slashed a bloody wound on her neck. She made a bloody cut on the woman's neck. Judging from the way she dealt with people, there was no way she could have survived. But this person was actually alive. Not only was she alive, but her cultivation had also advanced. Evidently, this woman who had come back from the dead already had a cultivation realm above hers. Even with her heaven-defying cultivation speed, she still wasn't as fast as the other parties. The little stoic blinked, and her fair and tender face subconsciously tensed up. One had to know that back in Wanlu Town, this woman's cultivation was clearly far inferior to hers. The unhappy little stoic suspiciously swept her gaze over that woman. At this time, the latter finally lifted her head and looked straight at Arbor with a faint smile on her face. Her pitch-black eyes seemed to contain two malicious vipers as she stared coldly at her without saying a word. Suddenly, a heavy pressure rushed toward Arbor. Without any warning, the little girl only felt her breathing turn heavy, as if her body would be crushed by a tall mountain at any moment. In the blink of an eye, Prince Mo pulled his wife into his arms to protect her, a trace of anger surfacing in his eyes. At the same time, Mu Xingshan also narrowed his eyes. With a flick of his sleeve, he instantly rebounded the pressure released by the other party. Cough. The woman took a few steps back before she managed to stabilize herself. Her face was flushed red from holding back her anger. Jing Minyao. Princess Jing frowned. She was very displeased with her third younger sister for finding trouble for no reason. Did Jing Minyao forget the pain after the wound healed? She had already died once, but she was still so willful. Wang Liming did not know how to teach her daughter. Now that the Crown Prince of Shenzhou was standing in front of them, what good would come of attacking his little crown princess rashly? Jing Minyao's brainless approach was ridiculous. Do you want to die? The Crown Prince was furious. With a slight movement of his hand, he pulled Sir Jojo down. The little guy's gaze circled around Jing Minyao's body with a trace of curiosity. This person could not die for the time being. As a curious child, she wanted to find out why this person came back from the dead. In reality, faint ripples were surfacing in Xiao Mu's heart right now. Even those who had their throats slit by her were able to come back to life. It was clear that this family had a secret treasure that no one knew about. If she seemed to have grasped a strange inspiration, but before she could continue thinking, that hissing water snake swung its tail and swept toward the shore. Splat! The tail slapped the riverbank, directly smashing 200-year-old trees into pieces. Chapter 3008. Jing Linyao's attack and reaction speed were extremely fast. A long sword leaped up from her back with a whoosh, and the instant it flew forward, it ignited flames in front of her and built a tall wall of fire. When the fire soared up, the huge wave that the water snake sent out collided head-on with the wall of fire. The instant the water and fire came into contact, the fire seemed to be instantly extinguished by the torrential water. That water current was about to pounce on them regardless of anything. The little stoic calmly covered herself with an eggshell defensive barrier and expressionlessly gazed at the stream of water that swept towards her with a splash. Mu Xingshan's fingertips swiftly moved, and he threw over a dozen earth spirit talismans. Earth walls rapidly rose from the ground and were toppled one by one under the impact of the huge wave. It wasn't until the water current toppled 3 earth walls that it ran out of momentum and slowly came to a stop. The water current spread to their feet. They looked down and then looked up at the water snake perpendicular to the river's surface. That pair of lantern-sized eyes were currently staring fixedly at Arbor's group. The sinister intent in its eyes made people slightly apprehensive. Arbor creased his brows. This water snake had been entrenched in Duchun River for who knew how long. Judging from today's situation, it probably wouldn't end peacefully. Mo Lien patted the back of the little fellow's hand and whispered, "Wait here." He was just about to go over and personally dispose of this beast, but to his surprise, that huge-tailed water snake used its triangular eyes to carefully stare at them before suddenly plunging its head into the water and falling silent at once. Mo Lien, Arbor, and Duan Yu's group looked at each other, bewildered. What was going on? They hadn't even started fighting yet, But that water snake suddenly slipped away. Then why did it cause such a huge commotion earlier? Holy Sun Mi Yen also sighed in relief and said, "It's not easy for beasts to advance to divine beasts. It seems that this water snake is also smart and intelligent. It should know that if you gang up on it, it won't be your match." Arbor glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen suspiciously. "You are not it. How do you know what it is thinking?" He spoke as if it was true. What did he even say about being worried that they would gang up on him? That was why he ran away. Holy Sun Mi Yan's face was full of righteousness, and his eyes were calm. Although this Holy Sun's guess is not correct, it is not far from it. "All right." Holy Sun Mi Yen directly interrupted the little stoic. "It's getting late. Since these two from the Panga clan have also arrived, then let's board the ship and continue our journey. I think it's better for you to set up some defenses on that ship," the little stoic said dryly. "Protection? That water snake must have dived into the water and waited for an opportunity to strike. I think that as long as we give it a chance, it will come back and continue to cause trouble for us." Holy Sun Mi Yen grumpily retorted, "You are not that water snake. How do you know it will still lurk in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to take action?" "Enough. Let's talk after we return to the ship." Holy Sun Mi Yen harumphed and turned around to leave swiftly on the water's surface. Sir Jojo pursed his lips and quietly said, "That's my intuition." Qi Xianxian glanced in the direction that Holy Sun left. "Ignore him. I think this person won't shed tears until he sees the coffin." Mo Lien was a bit amused. "In that case, let's also return to the ship first." Arbor nodded and looked back. Chapter 3009. The sacrificial maiden that Liang Qingqing had saved earlier had already escaped with her mother. The few of them didn't pay much attention to it. They were just casually saving someone, so there was no need for others to come forward and thank them. If they left, then so be it. It was quite worry-free. Arbor and Emolien's group returned to the ship and saw that the two sisters, Jing Linyao and Jing Minyao, had also boarded the ship. Miss Chiao looked at Jing Minyao meaningfully and secretly tugged at her husband's sleeve. Emolien nodded slightly in understanding and pulled her little hand to the stern of the ship. The two found a secluded spot at the stern of the ship and then whispered to each other. "Wife, why are you always tugging at me and not letting me deal with that woman?" Prince Mo rubbed his little wife's head. "Now that this person is a level 3 divine master, it will be somewhat difficult for you to deal with her." Yet Xiao Mu was perplexed no matter how much she thought about it. How did she get promoted so quickly? "Do you still remember the clan's secret technique that I mentioned to you before?" Arbor suddenly understood. "You're saying that this Jing Minyao was cultivated using a secret technique. She used mithril to comprehend one of the 5 spirit origins, skipped the spirit realm, and went straight to the divine realm?" Emolien nodded with a straight face. Arbor blinked and patted Emolien's chest. "Don't worry, I will run if I can't beat her." Emolien inexplicably wanted to laugh. She reached out and pulled her to her side. She lowered her head and rubbed her little face. "Little liar. When have you ever run away when you fight?" In the end, didn't she get really angry when she fought with her opponent? The stronger the opponent, the stronger she became. Arbor moved her little mouth, wanting to say something to defend herself, but after thinking about it, it seemed that it was indeed as Emolien said. She pretended to cough and then said, "Emolien, what treasure does the Jing clan have?" "Are you talking about Jing Minyao's resurrection?" Emolien said softly, "I've always heard that the Jing clan indeed has a treasure that can pass down the yin and yang fortune called the soul congregation bell. This soul gathering bell can gather a person's soul, reverse the yin and yang of heaven and earth, and bring back the dead. Rumor has it that people who have been dead for more than 10 years can be revived with the help of the soul convening bell. As long as the body is intact, resurrection is not a problem at all." A trace of excitement flashed across the little stoic's face, and she reached out to grab Emolien's arm at once. "What's wrong, Jojo?" "Soul gathering bell, I. She finally knew what the spark that flashed through her mind was. She wanted this soul congregation bell. Since the soul congregation bell could bring the dead back to life, Then her senior sister, who had been sealed in the ice coffin for many years, could you want to use the Seoul congregation bell to revive Senior Su Shanshan? Arbor nodded her little head vigorously. Mo Lien muttered to himself for a moment before nodding and saying, "Perhaps it can work. But Jojo, let's put this out in advance. Senior Sister Su has passed away for many years, and no one can say for sure or guarantee something as ethereal as a soul. Whether the Seoul congregation bell can gather Senior Sister Su's soul again, whether it can truly wake Senior Sister Su up, this matter is still more of a legend after all." Arbor's large, watery eyes curved slightly. She actually understood Mo Lien's meaning. He wanted to tell her not to have too much hope. "We will do our best for this matter." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.